Hey, what's up, everyone? Let me check my schedule real quick here. A couple things going on. I think I'm going to hop on and talk with Destiny a little about sort of my job, homelessness, things like that. I do have a panel coming up at 6 p.m. Eastern time, though. Destiny and home lefties are mentally ill. I think the topic's going to be more centered around homelessness, which peripherally my work deals with. But we'll hop in. So this isn't on Twitch for obvious reasons. Because Destiny's banned there and it's stupid and blah, blah, blah. But all right, I'm going to hop into his room. We'll see what's up.
Uh-oh. Who joined?
Mr. Borelli. Have some decency. You know? How's it going?
It's going. How'd you feel about your Tim Pool performance?
Mixed bag. I was only supposed to do the morning Culture Wars show, and I guess had a good enough impression that they had me on for the evening show. Evening show delved into Israel-Palestine. I'm not too impressed with Tim's treatment of the other guest, who is more pro-Palestine. I thought that it came off as, a little browbeating of that person. So I just kind of sat quietly back and listened to them run in circles for an hour and a half. But I still had a great time. I thought the people behind the scenes were very nice. Tim was very nice behind the scenes, and I enjoyed it. It was bad timing for me, though, because for a smaller streamer like me, you'd like to parlay that into like, okay, now I'm going to do a bunch of streams right after that and hopefully get a small bump. But unfortunately, my wife was going on vacation, like a bridal shower thing for 5 days, so I had to single dad it. So I was unable to stream for like the next 6 days. So, but it was still fun. I was glad to do it, and hopefully.
Wait, how old is your child?
Three. So.
Ooh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so it was fun. It was interesting because that was the longest amount of time my son was without his mom being around. So it was a lot of fun to kind of, eat cookies and shit like that he's not supposed to be doing. We had a good time. So
Here's a random question. Do you think it would be easier to have 2 kids that are the same age as opposed to 1 kid?
Yeah, I do. I kind of
do.
I can see there's pluses and minuses of it. Like, do you mean like directly the same age, like twins, or do you mean like a year
basically
apart?
like close enough? Because I'm sure now, because you spent 5 days with them, kids are, God, you feel like, not to project, I'm not projecting, I'm not accusing you. When I say you, I mean in the general sense.
Sure.
Sorry, I just qualified that like 50 times, yeah. You feel like such a shit parent, though, when it's like, you have your kid, and it's like, okay, I'm going to spend every waking moment for the next week. Mom is out of town, that's going to be awesome. And then like on day 1, like 3 hours in, it's like, okay, fuck, we need to get the TV, the iPad out, because this motherfucker literally needs all of my attention. Oh my God. There were so many times with Nathan as a kid when he was like 3, 4, 5, where I'm like, you need a brother. Holy shit. Yeah. Like, I can't just run around and do all this random shit for hours. Yeah, because they never stop. It's like crazy. And I always wondered sometimes, like, I wonder if it's easier to have twins or to have 2 children that can like occupy each other's attention. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that that's one of my failures as a father that I could already see that I need to get better, is that when I see my friends that have multiple kids, which by the way, most people my age, I'm 39, most of my friend group chose not to have kids, but those that do, I feel like, I talk to someone like Connor Points, and he's like, dude, you gotta leave your kid at the playground, just run around and be a maniac. Me, I'm like on eggshells. I'm like, oh my God, that slide's too big. And I gotta do everything for him. And I think that's unfair to him. He needs some certain amount of independence. And I think once you have multiple children, particularly if they're around the same age, you sort of let them, because it would be too burdensome to be like that to both of them. But you also start to realize that they're sort of taking care of each other with a lot of their like curious needs and things like that. So I do think now in other ways it would just be straight up more difficult because
for sure
you're cleaning a mess
more
up in one corner, right?
You got two sets of diapers and all that shit. Yeah, sure.
But
okay, I'm curious. Because we were talking about homelessness stuff the other day. Real quick for Chad, for as comfortable or as deep as you're going into, what is your job again?
So I'm called a residential counselor, but basically it's a job that you could have a GED and do, and it is doing home health care for adults with developmental disabilities. The particular company I work with has 2 groups. One is what we call comprehensive. Comprehensive is legitimately just people that have some sort of developmental disability diagnosis. That mostly like heavily see things like autism, developmental delays. You see these weird broad diagnoses like intermittent explosive disorder, which is just a fun way of saying they get mad and hit people or destroy property or something at times. The other section's called Signals. Signals has a lot of people that have similar diagnoses, but they've had trouble with the law, particularly with sex offenses. And so it might be someone that's heavily autistic, but unfortunately he's expose themselves in public or something around a crowd or around children. And so there's different levels of care that's involved with people like that. Obviously, if you're going out into the community, there are certain restrictions and things like that that need to be applied. But that's basically it. My job is to help facilitate that person's quality of lives and the goals that they have. So I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. I am trained in passing medications. Depending on the clients you work with, you might be trained to give insulin, to give simple injections. But I'm not making any medical decisions. I'm just there to help facilitate someone's quality of life, basically.
Yeah. So a question that I have is, do any of the people that you deal with, did any of them come from the streets, or were any of them like previously homeless and they've like transitioning from halfway homes into full-time, like living on their own with assistance? Or have you ever dealt with anybody in that capacity before? Yeah,
so I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm in Western Pennsylvania. There are companies like mine that are cropping up all over the place. And one of the reasons is the closing down of sort of the old school traditional mental facilities. So there was a sort of a famous one around here called Polk. And famously in the 80s, Nancy Reagan went to this hospital and found the conditions to be disgusting in there. There's a story, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard this story because it's like only 40 minutes away from me, Polk. Apparently they used to bury the patients out back, but only like 3 feet deep. And there was a big flood that came through at one point, and there were just bodies of these patients that were like washing up into the local streets and stuff. And so it was like that level of care that Nancy Reagan was not a fan of. And it started to sort of direct a national spotlight on Polk, but also in facilities like that. Now, to the people that worked at Polk, there are horror stories, don't get me wrong. Like it's Shutter Island type stuff you would hear. But you also have to imagine their budget's very low, and they might have 5 staff for every 100 patients. And many of these patients, particularly back in the day, but even still to this day, you just don't know what to do. Like if there's someone that has such a diagnosis that they're enraged and you can't calm them down. And, I won't get into specific details, but sometimes people that have these diagnoses, they'll just be inconsolable about something, and it could make them stronger than you would think that a human being could be. And you're some 120-pound nurse and you got 20 other people in that wing. What are you going to do? So they strap them down to a gurney. And, and then those people are deemed monsters the rest of the life. Oh, how could you do this to these people? And in some senses, I get it. Many of the people I work with, it's horrible. Have you ever seen the movie Shawshank Redemption?
Yeah, I have.
So there's the scene in Shawshank where Morgan Freeman gets out and he's working at a grocery store. And he keeps asking his boss, like, can I go to the restroom? Can I do this? And the boss is like, of course, you're a human being. That's what it's like for a lot of the people I work with. It was like jail. Like when they'll say little things like, can I get a glass of water? I'm like, yeah, buddy, it's your house. Of course you can get a glass of water. Can I change the channel? Of course, it's your TV. I'm just here to help you. It's your home. So there are certainly people that were in Polk that were on the streets first and then left that facility to a place like mine. And there are people in our company that literally were homeless. Most of the time, the way that happens, the ones that ended up homeless were they had some sort of diagnosis and they had a family member that was taking care of them. And then their family member passes away, or they end up, having failing health, or they, or elderly
just
where
can't
they
support them anymore.
They can't support them. And so then those people end up on the streets, and then sometimes law enforcement has to deal with them, and through diagnosis, they end up getting recommended for a facility like mine.
Do you think, one comment on that real quick. Have you ever watched House?
Yeah.
Generally, the medical stuff is like kind of memey. I don't care much, whatever. The one thing that they do on that show that drives me fucking crazy, that I think if you've never dealt with somebody that has like severe mental disabilities, is there are people that are very mentally disabled in some House episodes, but House like always finds the perfect words to say to all of a sudden like bring them in line. It's very frustrating that people in real life don't have a lot of experience dealing with somebody who, you said inconsolable, is literally beyond like rational comprehension. Like there is no set of words. And then also, like you said, and this comes up in cop videos a lot too, it's really hard to bring a full-bodied adult male under control without severely hurting the person. That is a really challenging thing to do. Like you need like 6 people to do it. It's not just one dude that's beefy. It's not 2 dudes. Like it could be a lot of people. If you got like a 6-foot, 200-pound, low-functioning autistic person that's having a breakdown, and people are just like, people will see it. Like you said, they see somebody like tied to a bed and like, oh my God, this is inhuman. How could you do this? But it's like, bro, like this is a challenge like you have no idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know how deep we can get into this. I obviously, because of HIPAA, and you have to have concern for people's medical privacy, so I can only speak in generalities of situations that I've seen. But companies that I purposely chose to work for companies that are non-restraint, because I have zero interest in restraining someone. Now, I'm still trained to do the most simple restraints imaginable. Like, we consider a restraint like a wrist hold to grab someone by the wrist safely, and if they're trying to walk into traffic. Technically, that's a restraint, and I have to file a report if I do that, because that is impairing their mobility against their will.
It's assault and battery, technically, right? So you have to have a reason to,
Exactly. So now there are companies that straight up, because of the violent nature of some of the clients, they're trained to do holds, like hold someone to the ground or hold them with their arms behind their back, and you have to go through training to be able to do that. But the first company I was in, it's kind of a crazy story. I was a debate coach at a local university. I debated there. I was a drunk. Once I ran out of debate eligibility, I became the coach there and continued to be a drunk. No problem. In like 2008, the Pennsylvania budget didn't pass. It was a state school. I walked into work one day. They're like, sorry, dude, see you later. So I picked up the newspaper and was like, I'm going to put my name in for like any random job, security guard, stuff like that.
Wait, hold on. Am I missing, when you say you were drunk, do you mean like you had a problem with sobriety, like an alcoholism?
Oh, yeah, I was like a college partier. I drank I was pretty cool. I kept my shit together. Like, I wasn't big into drinking and driving, and I certainly stayed sober when I was at work. But any day I had off.
I didn't know if you meant you were like an alcoholic drunk, if that was okay. But okay, gotcha. Okay,
I may be considered an alcoholic, but yeah, I kept my shit together. Anyways, I put my name in for this company. They called me back immediately, and I was like, well, what are the details? They're like, oh, you'd work with people with like, mental retardation and autism and whatever. I was like, yeah, sure, sounds good. And I went, and we go through the training, and it's 2 days. Me and my friend went together, and at the end of it, they're like, would you mind getting hit? And I was like, I guess not. My friend was like, yeah, I would mind. So we both started off at 10 or $11 an hour. My friend's job, the client he worked with, he played Wii bowling all day, every day. My job, I got the shit beat out of me and I got hospitalized like 6 times. Same job, same money, just different clients. The client that I was put with was formerly at a previous facility where he was staffed 4 to 1. And they would restrain him for hours a day. It's kind of a really sad story. He was the strongest human being I've ever seen. He weighed upwards of 400 pounds. He had a steel reinforced chair that it took me and another guy to drag across the room. The first day I was there, we drug it so he could sweep. Later that night, I watched him pick it up over his head and throw it through a wall. And he was a sweet guy, but he had constant seizures, and when he would have an episode, there was no talking to him, and that makes it worse, right? Because if it's someone who you could never get through to, then it's like, well, you don't have that expectation. But the guy that you were just sitting there eating dinner with, and he's kind of nonverbal, but you could see that he's relating to you, and then all of a sudden, he's smashing out a window and chasing you with a pane of glass, or he ripped power lines down one time. It was, and where he would attack members of the community. And what I started to see there was, after doing that job for a while, I started to see that there was not one person in the professional field anywhere that I saw that gave 2 shits about this guy but me. He was adopted. His adopted mother didn't care about him. The people at the top of our company, they didn't care. There's almost like a bounty system. So go ahead.
I will say on that note, though, for the people around you, and you might agree, you might disagree with this, that there are a lot of people who can be around a person and you're like, this person is sweet, they just need help. I can't believe you guys seem so uncaring about this person. But man, dude, caretaker burnout, that takes a toll when you're dealing with this person for weeks or months or years. I feel really bad when it happens to families that get burnt out caring for older family members where they just can't do it anymore. Now, maybe in this circumstance, maybe everyone around them was just generally a piece of shit, but even people that mean well, I feel like that burnout is a real thing.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And the other staff that worked with me, we were supposed to be 3 to 1. Most of the time I was there by myself or with 2 people, which was a violation of the state regulations, but they couldn't find people that were willing to work. And I don't blame anyone who goes, probably the best person that worked with me was a 120-pound Asian woman. And you'd be like, man, if this guy connected one blow on you, it would be devastating. She was fearless, man. She was way more brave than I was. She was sort of my mentor so there were good people in my position. But I'm talking about when we went to a doctor's office, doctors would refuse to allow us in the office. They would make us sit in the car and literally send the secretary out with scripts. They would not even see him, not even look at him. When some of the police officers that we dealt with regularly were nice, but like the people at the psychiatric hospitals we go to, just another patient, put him in there, handcuff him to the bed, we'll get to him later. And again, I understand those people were dealing with a difficult situation, but it just struck me that it was like, this is still a person that society has zero clue what to do with, like none. Yeah. And I begged my company over and over and over. I have a big heart. I'm for maximum freedom for people. This person should not have been in our company. Our company was not equipped to handle him. It was one thing when he would attack me. I don't mean to be rude or like make fun of it. It was almost like watching a movie with like Frankenstein or a mummy where he would come at you slowly. You can get away. Like, I'm not the fastest person in the world, but I was far more agile and fast than him. The problem was he would go after members of the community. And then I'm put in a position where I can't watch him beat some young girl to death. So I'm going to intervene. But legally, I'm not allowed. Legally, I'm not allowed to, like, try to throw him to the ground. And by the way, if I tried to throw him to the ground, he would swat me away like a fly anyways. So I kept seeing it getting closer and closer to harming members of the community. And I'm desperately telling my company, like, you have to get this person in a more secure facility. I understand that sucks. If you have a big heart, you might be saying, no. You got to have maximum freedom. Leave these people live their lives. And I agree with that. But you can only give someone freedom up to the point where they're not a threat to other people. And this person was clearly a threat.
And something I think that's really tragic is people don't realize when you're dealing with people that might have a limited capacity in some regards to control themselves or their outbursts, it might seem cruel or evil sometimes to restrict them more. But in reality, you're doing everybody, that person included, a favor. I don't remember, did we ever talk about that one kid that went viral because I think he killed a teacher for taking his PSP?
Yeah, I saw. I haven't talked to you about it, but I saw the video. Yeah,
Beat her. That was a thing where I read a little bit about it. If I remember correctly, everybody was passing this off as like over entitled, horrible fucking kid that murders teacher for no reason. But I think that when more info came out about it, I think that kid was on a pretty hardcore IEP. That did he kill her or did he just beat her up? She might not have gotten killed. He might have just beat the shit out of her. But it was like sure. I think it was pretty obvious when more info came out. This kid was like super special needs, and it seemed like he probably shouldn't have been in that environment. Or if somebody was going to deal with him, they needed to understand what what type of person they were dealing with. That you couldn't just approach them like an ordinary kid and issue commands or take things from them without having an understanding of what exactly they were dealing with. And that just seemed to me like an example of, well, if you give people that need a little bit more special attention or care unlimited freedom to exist in some environment, not only are they going to hurt other people, that person's going to be hurt too, because people are going to have to restrain them, people are going to call the cops, and it just turns into like a whole shit show.
Yeah, and it's like, so the previous company the person was in, I knew people that worked in that company, and our company would make like insult that company, be like, can you believe they restrained this guy 4-1? What quality of life is that? To which I would counter with, we ended up with like the state police showing up at our house probably about once a week. And it was like Hannibal Lecter shit. Like they would handcuff him to a gurney and put him in the back of a police van. One time we went to an emergency room and he started strangling one of the cops and they tased him several times. They could not get him to release his grip. And I'm talking grown men, not like the cops you see sometimes where it's like, dudes that look like me that look like they just got back. These are like Marine looking dudes that are getting swatted around in this emergency room. And I live in a small enough area that our emergency room at the local hospital, there's not like rooms. There's literally curtains you pull. So that imagine you're in there getting treated with the flu and all of a sudden you hear this life and death struggle with tasers going off with this guy just screaming like sounds that don't sound of this earth as he's strangling a state police officer to death. And so after that incident, the head state police officer pulled me aside. He was a nice guy and he said, I just want to let you know we're never using tasers again. Next time it's shotguns.
Yeah,
and he was dead
because
serious.
A lot of compliance, a lot of like painful compliance and stuff, it relies on the other person registering the pain and stopping.
Right. That's exactly.
But depending on the type of character you're dealing with, especially if there are severe mental problems at play, they just won't give a fuck. Yeah.
And so, so then my answer was, well, what's the quality of life for my client if he's getting a shotgun put in his face every week? That's not a good quality of life. I agree. All things, and this is where listen, I know I'm right wing, right? This is an issue that I happen to like take to heart, but there's these two competing ideals that are extreme where the one ideal is like, screw these people, just lock them up, mentally ill, put them in a facility, lock it up, throw away the key. I don't agree with that, but there's people that are a problem on the other side too, that are so sort of progressive and hippie. They're just like, oh, just like, for example, I had the doctor that we dealt with at that company as a consultant had Asperger's. I'm not making any of this up. This is totally true. He told me one time that the problem wasn't my client. The problem was that his house was haunted with demons. So they made me take an exorcism class, which is batshit crazy. It's like, no, that's not the problem. Then he told me that the farm that we lived by, that there were horses there, and my person who was basically nonverbal, he could talk in single words repetitively. So he would say like food 60 times in a row. That was the ability of his speaking patterns. He said that he told him telepathically that he wanted to talk to the horses at the farm. So I went and talked to the farmer, and the farmer said, we haven't had horses for 40 years. And then our doctor said, yes, he means the spirits of the horses. That's what he wants to talk to. And so this is the guy I'm dealing with, and this guy's telling me every day, take him to Dairy Queen. Take him to the kids' play place at McDonald's. And I'm telling this doctor, like, he'll kill someone. He's going to kill someone. And the doctor's telling me, he made me write a paper about my negative attitudes because my negative attitude was leading to violence. And so you could see the problem at the opposite end of the spectrum, where I understand having a big heart for that guy. I love that guy. I did. I worked with him for 2 years, and I felt like I was his only friend. But I also knew you couldn't have him in public. I knew that he needed to be restrained. And, ultimately they did things like they drugged him to the point where he was a zombie. And then people at the state said that wasn't right. So they took him off those drugs. Then he became violent. He was the first person readmitted to Polk Center, I think, in 7 years or something like that. I had a falling out with that company, and he ended up passing away in Polk with no people at his funeral. My company, because I no longer work for them, wouldn't give me permission to go to his funeral. So that's how it ended for him. So.
If we've largely gotten rid of, or at least I hear this repeated a lot, I don't actually know if it's true, I just hear it repeated so much, I assume it's true. If we've largely gotten rid of like the institutionalization places for psychiatric conditions, like the long-term ones, where are these people at now? Do they just bounce between jail and the streets, or like where do these people go?
A lot of them went to companies like mine. So it's one of the fastest growing industries where people, I forget what the requirements are. I think you could have a master's. Technically, I have a master's degree, so I could start my own company probably, but I'm lazy. I don't have the business mindset to do that. Or you have to work so many years administratively in the field. I would guess.
I'm asking for people that are your clients. Are these people, does the state pay for everything, or do they have some other income source? Like, have they worked, or do they have family that are paying, or how can they afford your company services?
So it's similar to like someone going into a nursing home in some senses, where if the family can pay, or if they have assets in some senses, just like when you go to the nursing home and you sign over a portion of those, sometimes that happens. But the bulk of the money, the overwhelming majority of the money, comes from the state. Almost everyone that I'm dealing with has limited connections to family, and if they have connections to family, they're not necessarily wealthy people. I think if you were wealthy and could afford it, you're probably getting some sort of private service. I don't want to talk ill of my specific company. It's the best company I've worked for, but I could say this, in every company I've been in totality, probably 50 to 60% of the people that have my job, I wouldn't trust to watch my goldfish. They're terrible. When you pay people minimum wage, you're going to get a certain clientele of people. And so imagine you have an autistic daughter or sister, and you put them in this facility, and the person that's taking care of them is making $10 an hour. Who do you think you're going to get? Well, you're going to get people that probably couldn't qualify for jobs that were better. And so it's this weird,
I have not to do the super progressive cuck side, although it seems like you're partially there because I'm a big capitalist, but it does feel really weird driving to school and, dropping my son off at a place where everybody's getting paid, $42,000 an hour to be the most important influences in the early 4, 5, 6 years of his life. Yeah. It's insane to me, the level of compensation for people that are involved in some of the most important functions in society sometimes.
And end of life care.
Did I say 42,000 an hour? Sorry, 40,000 a year.
Think of hospice care or elderly care. Like, imagine how many people that their intimate last moments are with a stranger that's getting paid $14 an hour. because the family lives 3 states over. And it's not even that the family's mean. It's just, what are you going to do if you're 40 and you have kids and you have a career? You're going to stop your life to sit there every day with your ailing father? It's difficult. I find it so strange how we do that. But that's the way it is. So then you have to ask yourself this question. For me, what I do is ideal with people with mental illness. So taking this to homelessness. Now, there's different types of mental illness. Some people, if people are at a certain level where they have some sort of cognitive understanding and they choose to not get help, what can you really do? You can't force you can, but at that point, they don't have to accept the treatment, and then they're going to end up in a harder facility, jail or a psychiatric facility. Or
homeless,
Right. So you could be like, oh, yeah, I think, I'm super progressive, so I think what Rob's talking about is good. Let's give every mentally ill person their own home and 3 to 5 staff to work round the clock 24/7. The amount of money, even if you're paying people like me dirt money, it's insane. You have to pay for the house. You have to pay for the upkeeping. You have to the insurance and stuff. All of the medical visits.
Something on this track. So this is what I'm kind of curious. I don't know if I asked this directly. I was kind of getting towards this. For 2 questions. One is like all the people that you see are privately housed, right? They're not
Correct.
like in large facilities, right? And then the second question would be, do you think that they should bring back, because there's a thing I hear talked about a lot, should they bring back some of those larger group home institutionalization things where people that just can't work or live on their own without full-time or close to full-time care?
Yeah, they should, to some degree. Now, I think that there should be far more oversight of it, and they should be staffed better. And I think that places like Polk were getting better. When my client got put into Polk, I believe they had 1 staff for every 5 patients at that point, which was incredibly better than what you heard about in the 80s, where it might be dozens of patients per staff. And so that more hands-on approach means even if things get more out of control, you have more options than if you have a room full of 20 people. What are you going to do if one person's out of control? There are certain, I still think that there is a space in between as much freedom as possible with someone with a mental disability living in their own home with care versus prison. I think that those sort of facilities do fall in between those two, and there's space for it. It will always be controversial. I mean, I understand that. If it was your kid, would you ever want them put in a facility like that? No, of course not. But it's difficult thing. It's people that fall through the cracks of society, and you have to ask yourself, even as someone who's sort of libertarian minded like me, at what point do we say you can't be in society because you have a mental issue that is so significant that you are a significant harm to those around you? And this comes through with homelessness as well. I have a heart for homeless people, absolutely. But I live in a place where there's hardly any homeless people. I live in rural America. But when I see videos, which I understand I'm getting a selective bias of the videos I'm seeing, but when I see videos of someone walking their kid to school in somewhere like San Francisco, and you see homeless addicts sitting outside their bus stop, for me, although I have a heart for those homeless people, at some point you have to say, this is not acceptable. We can't have this. And it's not enough to just be a hippie and go, well, just give them more money, give them clean needles, give them their own apartment. Something needs to happen at some point if they're unable or unwilling to put themselves in a situation where they're not a danger to, in that instance, children. And I know it comes off sounding like a monster when you say the way to deal with this problem is you have to enforce the law. You should have options for people. You absolutely should. You should have homeless facilities for them. You should have mental facilities and mental care, and that's going to cost money, and that sucks. But at the end of the day, you can't just be like, well, we'll just keep throwing money at the problem and leave them on the streets. You can't do it.
I think some of the frustration is that I feel like homeless people can be broken out into very distinct groups where they're not all the same type of homeless people. And then conservatives will talk about the relatively healthy, 26-year-old guy that just likes to do drugs and is lazy and wants to be homeless. And people on the left will only talk about, the PTSD war vet who has, severe mental health issues but doesn't know how to ask for help. When it seems like there's a lot of different types of homeless people, or there's 3 or 4 distinct groups of homeless people that all need different types of help. I'm curious for this one, because it sounds reasonable to say this, but in practice, you kind of brought the issue up earlier. How do you take a person, let me back up a second. Sometimes people say something and it bothers me. People will say, some people want to be homeless. And I think that that's true on a surface level, in the same way that some people want to keep drinking or some people want to do heroin. And I was like, well, once you're addicted, yeah, they do, right? And people make those choices. But I feel like if you're mentally well and you've got options in life, very few people would choose to be homeless, right? Usually something has gone very wrong to get the person to this point. How do you How do you compel somebody, though? Let's say you've got a person who's a little bit mentally disabled, but he's not like low functioning. He can, he can speak or whatever, but he can't hold down a job. He can't take care of himself, and he's homeless. And he's like, fuck it. Like, I'm not gonna, I'm just gonna be homeless. Fuck it. I can beg for money and do whatever and be crazy on the streets. How do you take that person's autonomy away and say, sorry, bro, you actually have no freedom. You have to go live in an institution.
It's incredibly difficult. And at the end of the day, if it's, let's say I fall in hard times, let's say, something, God forbid, would happen to close family members of mine, and I just give up because I don't think life's worth living, and I become an alcoholic, and I'm on the street, and I get into heavy drugs, I would probably say there is no damn way I'm voluntarily going into some facility like this. It's not going to happen. What do you do with me then? Like, at some point, you have to be like, okay, well then we're going to forcibly put you somewhere, and that's probably, if you refuse to go to a facility for help, then it's going to be jail. It's going to be some kind, I'll say it's sort of tangentially related to this. One of the things they go through in the training, and I do believe this, is you'll hear a lot in my line of work about incidents or acting up or behaviors. And one of the things they teach you is all behaviors are just attempts at communication. So let's say you're nonverbal and you feel like I'm your caretaker, but I'm ignoring you. I'm on my phone all day. All of a sudden you might act up by throwing the salt shaker against the wall. Then I write that report up. Oh, Destiny was acting up today. He smashed property and blah, blah, blah. But really, that was an attempt at a communication. Like, you had to get someone's attention. Now, that doesn't mean that everything that everyone I take care of is, we should forgive everything. They're benevolent. I believe the exact opposite. I believe we should treat people as close to normal as possible. Obviously, if you're disabled, there's some arrangements that need to be made. But if you could be a prick person that doesn't have an autism, well, then you could be a prick person that has autism. You could do things just to be a prick. But in general, what I've seen in my line of work is the more you could work with someone and leave them, sort of put them in a position where they could have the chance to do something and have the chance to have some control over their life, but suffer the natural consequences. So if you're diabetic and I take care of you and you're like, I'm going to eat that cake, I can't say no. All I could do is say, that's a really bad idea. I think more often than not, what you see is people make changes for the positive. And even people I've worked with I've never worked with someone with a significant drug addiction, but I've worked with people with alcohol and cigarette addictions. And it's gotten much better over time as you let them have more control over their life. And they didn't feel like they were in a terrible facility like the ones I talked to. And they realized that they were safe. It's difficult, but the truth is there's never going to be a perfect answer. There's always going to be people that fall through the crack, particularly that we call homeless or people that are problematic homeless. It will always happen. There will be a person that you could give the moon to. You could put them in the best facility in the world, make it the most comfortable, give them everything they want. And then 2 days after that, they're going to be right back in the streets doing the same thing. What do you do with that person? Did you say, oh, well, I guess our streets are going to be filled with people like this? Or do you say, okay, we have to take their autonomy away now? And, I'm sorry, I do come down, even though I have a big heart, I come down on that side of things where for the greater good of society, we have to say, like, no, you can't be engaged in dangerous behaviors in public like that negatively affect the residents' quality of life or the people's quality of life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree. It has to be paired with it sounds mean, but I think I wouldn't say being homeless should be illegal, but I think sleeping on the streets or any of that should be illegal. You shouldn't be allowed to do that, but only if there's like a place for you to go, obviously, right? Like you can't just be throwing these people.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. One of the things, so as a right winger, and I've told my office this, they don't listen to me. I ran for Congress here in this state, and I'm like, they have a bunch of people who are company employees whose entire job it is to basically lobby politicians. But in Pennsylvania, the only people they lobby is the Democrats. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, the Republicans don't really care about stuff like this. And I'm like, but that's because you have to talk to them in language they understand. So here's the case I make. Well, let's say that you don't take care of these people and you send them to prison. Are you aware that you're actually going to spend more money for them in prison? And think of the crimes and things like that, and like how you don't like seeing, homeless people, or you don't like seeing mentally ill people in public. Well, by having facilities like this and funding it, and I agree, I think that the government spends way too much money, and I'm hesitant to want to fund things as well. But by funding this, I think you're getting more net benefit from that funding than you would be elsewhere in funding in other areas. So I try to talk to Republicans like that and say, what are their concerns? Well, they're concerned about crime, and they're concerned about sort of the public space looking clean and being good. Well, I think facilities facilities, like, it's not going to solve it, but I think it significantly helps. And, it also, what you're doing is a lot of people that were written off because of their disability or their illness that wouldn't be productive of society. We have special job training programs, which are remarkable. You wouldn't believe some of the jobs that we have one person in our company that became a full-time fireman. Now, he doesn't do all the most difficult stuff, but he works in the fire department and helps keep the place clean. And it's actually an amazing story. This is someone 10 years ago that you would say that dude's going to be in prison his whole life, or he's going to be in a mental facility. Now he's working as a fireman. So, I mean, there are options. I think there are positive stories that come out of it. And but on the other hand, I understand you can't be like, oh, so what are we going to do, Rob? Where every single person that has any mental illness, here's your own free house. Here's 5 staff to take care of you. Of course, that's unfeasible. So it'll never be perfect, but I think right now it's a better answer we have than either just the medical facilities or sending people to prison or just leaving them on the streets.
Yeah. Have you ever been to the West Coast?
No, the furthest I've been to Texas, Dallas. That's the furthest I've ever been west.
Okay, man, I've been up and down the East Coast quite a bit. West Coast homelessness hits different. The LA and Seattle, that shit is wild.
Well, I think it probably has to do with the fact that first and foremost that it's comfortable there, like as far as the climate goes.
I think the weather helps a ton. Yeah,
like you don't want to be homeless in Chicago in the winter. That'd be terrible, So if you can make your way to LA where it's beautiful all the time, and then obviously you have more progressive people that okay.
Some of like the regulations and laws that they write up in some of these cities, where it's like you can't have a homeless tent shelter built. They draw restrictions, like as long as you're 1 foot away from the edge of the sidewalk, it's okay. I'm like, this is wild.
When I always thought it was wild, like,
my God,
like the juxtaposition, like I'm in Appalachia. I see poor communities. But here's the thing, where I'm at, where I see, and like I've seen communities where meth has ravaged them. Like I forget who it was. Like I think it's Bill Burr has a joke. Like, do you ever drive through one of these towns and you're like, "Fuck this shit"? Like you can just tell. I've lived in those towns, right? It's a different kind of poverty, though. It is. And one of the things, other than like, there's not people piled on top of each other like poverty in a city. One of the things that I think is different is when you're in a poor area, it's a poor area. When I see like pictures of LA and San Francisco, you'll see these beautiful houses. And then the camera could pan like 2 blocks and there's homeless encampments. And it's like mind-blowing to me that we live in a society where you basically have palaces that throughout history, these would have been considered some of the greatest homes that you could ever imagine living in. And not 2 blocks away, there's encampments of like homeless people with mental illness, drug, open air drug markets and things like that. It's just, it blows my mind. I don't know what that's like. I've never experienced seeing these beautiful upscale businesses and homes right next to incredible poverty. For me, if it's poverty, it's poverty. And if it's a good neighborhood, it's a good neighborhood.
Yeah. Okay. I was just kind of curious on your homeless issues take. It seems like a problem that you have to, it seems like the most important thing at first is getting people to recognize that there are different types of homeless people. And then you've got to get people to combat it in ways that actually fixes the problem. But it's a pretty multi-dimensional problem to fix because of all the different groups of people involved. It's just frustrating listening to people talk about it, I guess.
Yeah, I totally agree. I wanted to ask you a question, if you don't mind, or bring up a topic. Yeah. I'd mentioned this on Twitter, but
go for it.
For purely selfish reasons, I don't understand the following. Let's say I'm a right-winger that hates you. Now, I don't think I hate you, but I'm certainly a right-winger that disagrees with you. But let's say it's someone that actually hates you. Why in God's name, anyone that streams would be upset or say you don't have a place on Piers Morgan's show or on Lex Friedman when you're debating Finkelstein or whatever? For purely selfish reasons, wouldn't it be better if a streamer like you is breaking into the mainstream for any streamer, even if they hate you, than if you were gatekeeped out of it?
It's all just like partisan shit, right? If you like the person, then it's good. If you don't like the person, then it's bad. I think it's really as simple as that. If you try to analyze it in a more complicated way, it's going to be really challenging. But the simple way is just like, if you like the person, it's good. If you don't like them, it's bad.
Yeah, I thought it was so dumb. Because I made a comment publicly, it was like, I don't understand why people are bagging on Destiny. And I had a bunch of people like, oh, you simp for Destiny now. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? I've talked to Destiny. My chance of getting on a bigger show increases exponentially if he's getting on a bigger show. So for purely selfish reasons, no, it's more than that. I think it's especially for people on the left, like the Finkelstein camp or what. I guess I don't know much about this guy, but like people that are super progressive lefty. When I went to university in 2002, I went for journalism, and the big talk of all my lefty professors was the idea of gatekeeping. And they would say things like, 9 corporations control all of the 95% of the media outlets in the country. And there's something to that. If we only allow certain voices to speak, well, you better get in a member of that group in order to have a voice. So it's amazing to see so many lefties that seemingly would believe that. Also like, well, I don't want a streamer that's a left-winger who favors Israel to have a platform like Destiny. He's just a joke. He's just going to make memes. And then Finkelstein owned him. And then when you're like, well, I didn't watch the debate, so I'm interested. I'm like, oh, what did Norm say that crushed it? Oh, he called him an asshole, or he said he's an idiot, or he intentionally mispronounced his name. Geez, that sounds like the exact same thing they're complaining about you about.
Yeah.
And it's just, so it blows my mind how people can't, even for, I understand people want to be partisan, but for God's sakes, can't you be selfish for the right reason and say like, yeah, this is a good thing. I'm glad that, people are getting a chance.
Yeah, no, it's all just partisan bullshit. Yeah, I think it's as simple as that. It's unfortunate, but it's as simple as that. Same thing when it comes to like freedom of speech and stuff. I think that freedom of speech becomes really important when you feel like you don't have it. But when you feel like you're in control, now there's like a whole bunch of reasons why it's dangerous. So like conservatives in the 90s and 2000s were really scared about like LGBT stuff or gay people or weird shit like on TV, and they didn't want their kids playing violent video games and blah, blah, blah. And people on the left were like the biggest freedom of speech proponents in the world because they want everybody to have a voice and diversity, and like all this needs to happen so that everybody can be heard. But now when the left is like kind of more in control of the media, well, now the conservatives like, well, actually, we changed our mind. We think that freedom of speech is the most important thing in the world. Right. And the left is like, actually, you know what? Paradox of tolerance, boom, you're destroyed. And then it just feels really dumb.
So I will say, though, at one time years ago, you had a video that I saw that mentioned my name where you said the way to end conspiracy theories were to end alternative media. Now, I think you were a little tongue-in-cheek. But if you reconsidered your stance of like we should trust the professionals and the people that are trained or academics in this class, now that you debate someone who's considered an academic who's higher than you like Finkelstein, where it didn't seem that case from the clips I saw. Have you reconsidered that we should just let the experts...
How long was this? How long ago was this video?
Probably 2 years ago. But it was in reference to, you even said yourself should not have a platform. You were talking about conspiracy theories, and you said one of the ways we end these conspiracy theories is to go back to just having a mainstream media and taking out alternative media because so many conspiracy theories spread there. And yes, that would mean...
I feel like I'd have to see the video, but I feel like if I said that 2 years ago, it must have been tongue-in-cheek. There's no way that I could have seriously... Because like if you go back like 5 to 6 years ago, or no, 6 to 7 years ago, I think I was more on kind of like some of the deplatforming stuff because I understood the arguments like, yeah, maybe deplatforming is okay and blah, blah, blah. But 2 years ago, that must have been tongue-in-cheek. That'd be my guess.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. Well, I hope you have a fantastic stream. Thanks for having me on. Hopefully next time we could argue about something we disagree with.
Yeah, wait. Can I do 2 quick things?
Sure.
2 random things. Can I give you critical career advice? I'm
sure.
just curious.
Yeah.
2 quick things. 1, have you ever considered for directing people towards your stuff, do you have like a name for anything you do? Or do you think robnoerr is like hard to spell and direct people towards? Do you think that would help?
Well, so people someone told me one time that I should have a name for my show, and so I came up with the Normal America Show as a play on my last. And then now people tell me don't do that, because when half of my stuff, like my X feed, is robnoerr, and it's not even spelled the same way as normal, that I'm confusing people. So if someone types in my name on YouTube, it's not going to show up. Normal America Show will show up. But I've thought about, I'm so fucking bad at marketing. I have no clue. Like the only thing I know how to do is come on, hit stream, and then just talk for hours. That's all I do. I understand, like, I'm fucking up in so many ways. If I had an editor that could clip things into, like, 3-minute burst, because unlike you, like, I'm a relative unknown. Who the hell's going to watch some guy they've never heard of come on and do a 6-hour live stream? Not many people. And so if I cut that down into 5-minute chunks, if I had better marketing, like a clever name, maybe that would help. So, I don't know, maybe it's something I consider. Do you have any suggestions?
No, I truly don't know. One of the biggest things that kept me from branding off Destiny is because I think my name is bad for branding, Stephen Bonnell, because it's difficult to spell and pronounce, and it's just like I don't want people to fucking mistype my shit. Like
Mr. Borelli, Mr.
Borelli, yeah.
That's. What do you think? My background. I heard you right before I came on talking about background. Shit. My wife put it together for me, so don't be.
Oh, I don't know. I don't even know if I've looked at your background. Second thing, have I ever given you this observation before? I don't know if I have. A secret technique, okay, or secret trick or whatever. You have a penchant for being a ruthless debater. and obviously my community and a whole bunch of people will get asked mad about our debate. I get asked mad about our debates. Do you feel that you are really easy to cut off?
Yeah, sometimes with you, yes. So
Okay.
so here's the thing. I'd like to reciprocate the energy that I'm getting, but I also have these other things. Some of it I think is simple. I'm not intimidated by you as a debater. I'm not intimidated by you as having a bigger show. But there is part of me when you invite me on, when you say, "Hey Rob, can you come on and explain your stance on the Burisma thing?" To me, it's your show. And if you want to cut me off because you invited me to your show, it's your show. So when you say, can you come on and talk to me about January 6th? Sure. If you cut me off every 2 minutes, that's different than if I'm in a moderated debate with you. At that point, I feel like, okay, this is both of our show for all equivalents. Here, well, it's the moderator show, but you see what I'm saying. Now, like I talked to Hutch. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say the only reason I bring this up is because in our debates, I have a very strong impression of that. I think in some of our debates, I think I even stopped myself. I'm like, well, hold on, let me let you finish. Because I think I can cut you off a lot, and usually I can get away with it. And at some point I realized, like, okay, hold on, this is too much. I don't know if I haven't watched your Tim Pool show. I don't know if other people do that, but you can definitely fight for more space when you're talking sometimes. Yeah. I notice it. I can always just cut you off and then start going, and then you won't get to finish your point, and then I can go down some other road. I don't try to do it intentionally, but it's something I notice.
Yeah, and I think that I've noticed that in the past couple times, but I think if you go back and watch when we were on panels, it's completely different. Like, I'll be trying to talk over you, and I'll cut you off and shit like that. But panels are different. You have to fight for space on there no matter what. So you gotta be the squeakiest wheel. But yeah, like yesterday I debated Hutch. And I start off, it was supposed to be an interview, I thought, but it became a debate. That's fine. I start off, and it's cordial, but Hutch is doing it more and more. He's interrupted. Like, he'll talk for 2 minutes, then I'll talk for 10 seconds, and he'll start to interrupt. And finally, I told him, I said, Hutch, here's how it's gonna go. I was like, I'm gonna progressively get more and more assertive as we move on, because I can't let you go on this 2 minute spree, and then as soon as I start answering, you're like, but wait, what about this? I was like, so I just want to let you know that's how it's going to go. And then unfortunately, I think what happens is I have no middle ground, right? So I take it from 0 to 100. So by the end of that debate, I'm like, Hutch, shut the fuck up. Like, just saying things like that. And then when I look back on it afterwards, I'm like, that's fine. That's who I really am. Like, I'm not putting on airs or anything. But is that the most persuasive way to get my opinion across? Probably not. So it's funny because I will have people, the impression that you would have that I'm easy to walk over. There are other people that say, like, Rob's a hothead and you can't get a word in edgewise with him when he's talking and this, that, and the other. So for me, I try to, other than what I already told you about being invited on someone's show, I try to reciprocate the energy. I thought one of the best debates for non-interrupt that I ever did was when me and you debated Biden's record on Politically Provoked. Like, Brittany, the moderator, she might as well have not been there. Like, we literally, you would talk 2 minutes, I would talk 2 minutes. You would talk 2 minutes, and then you would ask a question, I would answer briefly, and then leave you finish talking. It didn't require a moderator, and we weren't really interrupting each other. That's my preferable idea. The other thing is my style of debate. I like to do interaction, like back and forth. So I do talk in big chunks, but I love when I'm like, well, let me ask you this question real quick. And then you give a quick answer, and then I go off that answer. And a lot of times it doesn't work like that. So like with Hutch, when I'm talking to him, I'm like, well, let me ask you this. He'll talk for 2 minutes, and I go, let me ask you a quick question. And then he'll answer it with a 4 minute answer.
Yeah, I notice I can't do that when I'm in big debates, and it drives me crazy, because sometimes I want, like, can you clarify real quick?
Right.
What do you think about ABC? Well, ABC and the history of, and then it's just like, fuck me, I shouldn't have asked him a question. He's just going to talk for 4 more minutes. And yeah, I can't do that.
And I've tried to tell myself over and over and over again, when someone asks me a question, to always start off with yes or
ramble.
No if it's pause. Well, to start ramble, okay. I definitely ramble. I do. But I try to start off with yes or no, because it's so incredibly difficult if you say, like, what do you think the cop should have been called? And then someone talks for 3 minutes without saying yes or no. So you're trying to figure out, well, on one hand, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, okay, but what is your answer going to be? I find that incredibly frustrating. So I'll definitely be long-winded. But I try, if you would ask me, like, Rob, do you think this? I'll be like, yes. And here's why, right? I don't have a problem with that, and I know I could be long-winded. I get that, but to me, that's different so many times. I'll tell you one who's bad for it. It's Pisco. I remember the first time I debated Pisco, I said, Pisco, do you think before the FBI gets a FISA warrant that they should try to have to verify some of the information before they get it? And I put a timer up. He talked for 7 minutes without saying yes or no.
No
I was like,
shot.
how could you?
7 minutes?
Yes, 7 minutes. I'll see. I may have had to remove. I did basically delete my whole YouTube channel for community strikes over COVID at one point, but I'll see if I can find it. I'll DM it to you. He even laughed about it afterwards. I'm like, dude, you couldn't just say yes or no? And then he's like, oh, okay. Yeah. And I know I'm long-winded. It's funny. It's like one of the things I find funny is when I'll read comments of like when I debate you, people be like, Rob talks fast and he gish gallops. And I'm like, right. Nice. That's what they say about Destiny. It's kind of funny. So I'm not, it's pot calling kettle me criticizing Pisco for being long-winded. I get that. I'm just as bad. But I thought that particular instance, that's pretty funny.
Okay. Well, I think that's basically all I have. Yeah, I was just curious.
All right. Yeah, we'll talk. I'd love to talk to you someday about vaccine stuff that you were talking to Jordan Peterson about, but we could set that up some other day if you want.
Sure thing. All right. I'll talk to you later.
Take it easy.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Okay. Let me get set up. So we're doing Jimbob's panel here at message requests. Hi. Okay. I'm going to see. I don't know if this is possible because I'm technologically illiterate, but I'm going to see if I use my little restream here and click on with Twitch, if now it'll start my Twitch show. But it's so dumb. You can't talk to Destiny or a litany of others people on Twitch because he's banned, so I can't even stream when they're on there. The Arena by robnoerr. That was my show. 2 B's though, Red Hulk? Come on. Thank you, Weird World of Guy. Appreciate it. It's so weird. One of the things is, it is something that I struggle with. I do believe that we have an under-incarceration and an over-incarceration problem in this country. I think that there are people that are nonviolent offenders that somehow end up in the prison system, and because of the deplorable conditions of many of our prisons, end up having to fight for their lives basically in there and getting involved with terrible people. It said the background looks good. Good. The thing right behind me, my friend Jeff made. He does art projects like that, and then the rest of this was stuff purchased or created by my wife. So you can see, you can't really see it, but up top's my favorite. Right by my live on air is a picture of me and my son and my wife. But yeah, I enjoy this. And then, my friends bought me the Admiral Akbar. And then, I don't know if you can, I'm going the wrong way. Here, I'll get out of the way. This, obviously, is one of my favorites. This was for Father's Day. It says, Hooked on Daddy. It's my son. So let's, thank you, Prayer. I appreciate it. But yeah, it's very difficult to sort of be of a libertarian-esque mindset. What's up, Abago? And also agree that, sometimes people do need to be jailed. But we should also be spending money for facilities for people with developmental disabilities. So it is difficult. Now, I don't mind talking about it because I do think that it's an issue that a lot of people don't know. A lot of people have no clue about the style of work that I do. And I think it's important that people know that there are things other than just putting someone in a facility that you could do with people with these developmental issues. And oftentimes there could be respect. However, I hate talking about it because I feel that it comes through as me trying to appear sympathetic to people who otherwise fucking hate me. And that is not the goal. I don't mind. I assure you, I would much rather be talking about how I find these Democrat policies dog shit. And I'm going to be one of the fiercest people out there arguing against the issues that I talk about. So by no means am I trying to appear, oh, look how soft Rob is. He's on here talking about his job so he looks likable. That's not the intent. I hope I do look likable. I am who I am, but that's not why I do that shit. I'm not going out there trying to talk about my job to get some sort of sympathy points. How'd I get into my area of work? Because I'd like to be the guy that plays me. I don't know if you heard me saying, but literally I got fired from my job as a debate coach. I didn't really get fired. The budget didn't pass, so the job no longer existed. So I picked up a newspaper because I had bills to pay. I put my name in for 2 security guard positions and a position doing what I do, and this place called me first. And I was like, I'm not qualified to do that. I'm basically a drunk. So I went to the trainings. They're like, sure you are. Get in there. That's it. That was, 14 years ago. I worked for that company for a couple years, then was a bartender briefly when I left that company, and then I got a job at this other company, and I've worked with them for around 11 years now. I left briefly to sell insurance during COVID. Bad idea. Then I came back to the company, but I've basically been majoritarily with the same client for 11 years. And it's really hard because they tell you, I understand why they tell you this. They say that you're not there to be the person's friend. Now understand, right now at my house, there's only 2 of us. That means literally half of my life is in this house with this person. Half of my life right now. I go in, depending on the week, Saturdays or Sundays in the afternoon. So I go tomorrow at 3 p.m. and I'll be there 24/7 until Wednesday at 2 p.m. How could you, for 11 years, like, how could you not become friendly? Now, what they mean is, you can't just be a friend. Like, let me give you an example. Like, Red Hulk's here. Let's say Red Hulk was a friend of mine in real life from down the street, and I'd say, hey, Red Hulk, you want to go see the new Avengers movie in the theater? And he's like, yeah, let's do it. And I'm like, okay, we'll go Friday at, like, 7 p.m. show. Sounds great. I drive to the theater. Red Hulk's there. He gets out of the car, and he's like, I've decided I'm not going. I'd be like, what? He'd be like, yeah, I just changed my mind. I'd be like, no, that's a shitty move. What the fuck? That happens in my line of work all the time. All the time. And I can't get mad. So it is more than being a friend. When your friend spills their drink all over your lap, you might be like, hey, man, what are you doing? You can't do that when you're being paid. You're in a therapeutic relationship. You are being paid to be there. So I am lucky in that I have hours that I'm off the clock, but I still have to be at the home. So oftentimes when I clock out, when my client's in bed, then I'm able to stream. But so I've basically been with the same guy. He's basically part of my life. I know his family. I'm friendly with his family. I go to events with his family. It's like a weird mix of a relationship where I'm a caretaker, but it's also like my brother, right? Where it's someone that even if I didn't work for him, it would be someone that's dear to me. So it's an interesting thing. And I find that the good people you get in this line of work, because I said there's a lot of people, because it doesn't pay a lot. And so you're going to get 2 types of people. You're going to get people that it's just a job that's a stepping stone to something else. It's the only job they could have right now, and they really don't give a shit. And so those people you're going to either see like because of a criminal background or something else, or, they just aren't able to get a better job. And many times those people really aren't good at work. Some of them are, but most of the time they're really not. Or they're just they're there for a month or 2, and as soon as a better offer comes, they're out the door. And then the other types of staff are ones that fall in love with the people they take care of. You work with the same guy for 30 years, Sure, you're still getting paid $18 an hour, but the money's good enough for you to live and you like what you do. You're there with that person every day. I usually take care of one person. So it's a one-on-one relationship. How long do I stay with one person? So like I said, it's 24 hours a day. I go in Saturdays at 3 usually, and I'm there Wednesdays till 2. So, figure how many hours are there in a week? 168. I work at a minimum half of those hours. I'm in the home with that person. Now the person sleeps and has their own free time, so I'm not constantly in their hip pocket, but I'm there. What else? Change mine want to see Minions. I would be more for Minions. That's absolutely too. CG. How do I say your name? Goetch. It is tough. It's amazing too how perceptive. It's one of the things I've learned, how perceptive people are, particularly people that have a more difficult time communicating, because a lot of people that have autism or have trouble speaking or communicating in traditional ways, people will talk about them as if they're not there. They're just like in the background. And that's its own ball of wax. But one of the things that happens is it makes people very perceptive. And so I've had incidents, like imagine, this literally happened to me one time. I got a parking ticket and I didn't think I deserved it. And I got it as I was going to work. So I come out and there's like this $100, it was snow removal ticket. It was like $112. I'm pissed off. I get to work. I'm on the phone and I'm like yelling. And I'll never forget this. My client's like, I'm sorry. And I was like, what? He's like, I'm sorry. Because he got from me that anger and aggression, like I didn't want to be there. And that was early with working with the person I work with now. And I had to remind myself, like, you got to check your damn baggage at the door when you come in here, because it's not fair to him. He's interpreting that as, I don't want to be here. I'm yelling, I'm mad. And it's like, no, it has nothing to do with you, right? You're fine. You didn't do anything. I'm just having this heated moment. And you'll never be perfect. It'll never be perfect. Yeah, I like Destiny as well. I agree with you, Brian. And other things, like I said, I'll give him shit when I think, which is more often than not. But, it makes it really does. You get a feeling for, I'm there when I'm there. I'm not there when the other people are there. I know that sounds stupid, but what I mean by that is I don't really know what's going on in that house when I'm not there. What if someone just comes in and plays video games all day and ignores the person? Or they're on their phone watching TikToks all day and ignoring the person? What's that? That person knows that. Thank you, it's me. And then there's other things, right? As much of a big heart as I have, I've done stretches. There was a time where there was COVID in our household, and I ended up staying there for like 27 days in a row. And it's like, I don't care how good-spirited you try to be and how much. Just think of if you had a roommate, right? Forget about working with someone. Just a roommate that you're friends with. You get a room together. Imagine that you basically couldn't leave the house for 27 days and you're stuck in there together. You're going to start to get on each other's nerves. Well, certainly that happens when you're stuck at work like that too. And so, you have to try to check yourself and be like, dude, don't take it out. Like, come on. Because I'm being paid to be there. So I don't have the luxury of being like, nah, I get to be pissed off. I am, but I have to put forth my best foot forward. Oh, no problem, Brian. No problem. But yeah, that's the gist of my work. When it comes to homeless, that's only a small part of homelessness, by the way. I think mental illness, and there's different types of mental illness, right? There's mental illness, like I said, I've seen the highest levels of it. I've seen mental and physical illness where people are having seizures for hours at a time. And not like grand mal seizures. I've seen seizures where I don't even, oh my God, it's so, like, it's hard to talk about. I've seen seizures where someone's eyeballs will go like this for like 3 hours at a time. How could you, oh my, imagine living like that. Man. And I used to think about that. And then I'd be like, you're sitting there and you're watching this and you're like, here I am pissy because I'm at work tonight and I could be out at the bar. I could be with friends. But look at this poor guy. He didn't do anything. And he ended up in this situation. That's one thing, that type of person being out in the street. That's one thing. A person who's a functioning like, imagine if I was like schizophrenic as well. So I could sit here and talk to you, and then all of a sudden in the evening when I shut off the camera, I'm hearing voices, and I start doing it's different. You understand what I'm saying? It's different. It's a different way you would approach those situations. Yeah, I had a brother that had significant seizures, but yeah, I can't imagine, Crab. It's tough to think about. But it's also given me a lot of perspective on life as well in really positive ways. I don't make a lot of money. I make enough. I'm not missing any meals. I'm paying my bills. Send me all your money. I'll spend it. And it's easy to get lost in life of like, oh, I wish I had this. I wish I had a bigger channel. I wish I had more money. I wish my job paid more. I wish, no one's ever fully satisfied, I don't think. And then I work with people, so many, and my brother is a similar job, and I'm sure he would say the same thing. Most of the people I've worked with, and I've worked with dozens upon dozens of clients, primarily, I've spent the bulk of my time with one client, but I do overtime. I worked at other companies, right? Most of the people just want to be treated like regular people. They want friends. They want a boyfriend or a girlfriend. They want a job. They want to go see their family. They want to be able to go out and eat. They like going to the carnival. Those are things I like, like going out fishing. Like when you see that, it's like, man, I've worked with people that would do anything to have a job, anything. Then I know people in my real life that don't have any significant illness they'll never get a job. And it really does put it into perspective, like just how lucky I am. I have relative decent health. I have the things that really make you happy, right? I got a family. So it's like, what the hell is there to complain about? Yeah, I don't disagree, Gage. I think that wraparound supports are a good direction. I do. Thank you, Tiki. Here's another thing that's weird when you think about this. The ideal situation for my job is working myself out of a job, if that makes sense. So if you have a client that needs some level of support, the idea is to help them be as independent as possible. So the end game, if possible, would be complete independence, which would mean I would no longer have a job. But that's the end game. Now, sadly, it's not possible for a great many people in this line of work, or that need these sorts of services. But that's the idea. And I've seen it happen. I've seen houses that were staffed 2-to-1, 24/7, that are now like someone pops in for 2-3 hours a day. One person. So it's a weird feeling, like the better I am at my job, the less likely I'll have my job next year. It's sort of a weird feeling. But there's always room. Mental health crisis is crazy. You wouldn't believe the numbers of people. That's true. That's the goal for all therapy, right? But like, for example, I could tell you, again, I can only speak in generalities, but I could tell you that, for example, the mental health facility around here that's like open to the public, it's not a home care facility like mine, but it's like where a psychiatrist is working. We had to move away from that facility because the state mandates that people in a home like ours have to get a psychiatric appointment once every 90 days. And this facility could only see them once every 6 months. Thank you, Inversity. I appreciate the sub. I do. So we had to move on. And they were great facility, great psychiatrists. But they're just like, we are so booked up. Because in this little rural area, there's so many people that need to see a psychiatrist, that need that sort of attention. There's just not enough doctors. And that's why it's insane, the amount of companies like mine that are popping up. There's just not enough. There never is. Like my company, in order to operate, so you have sort of regulations that say each person, you have what's called like an ISP, an individual support plan, and the state has to sort of give the thumbs up on that, and they don't have the plan for the services that you'll provide. And one of the most basic things that every ISP will have is the ratio of care, like how many people will be here. So it might be that you're 1-to-1, which means 24 hours there is a staff on site. But it might say you're 1-to-1, but you're allowed up to 8 hours of fade time, which would mean that if they choose to be in their room or whatever for up to 8 hours, you don't have to check in on them. Maybe you have no fade time. It's 1-to-1 with no fade time. That means other than when they're sleeping at night, you need someone in the room with them constantly, right? Maybe you're 2-to-1. Which means there needs to be 2 people with that person constantly. Maybe you are 1-to-1 with an awake overnight, which means someone has to be awake 24/7. So when I go to bed, is the staff there's another person that comes in for 8 hours and stays awake. All of that's a possibility. Those are different levels of care that you might see. So imagine, let's say that our company, I don't know the exact number of people, but let's say they have 100 clients. And when you take all of those ratios of care, how many employees would we need? Direct support professionals would we need? Let's say that number's like 500. This is hypothetical. I don't know the exact numbers. So if we had 500 people that did my job, we would be at 100% capacity for the amount of employees we need. The number for our company is like 67% capacity. That means that we're 33% short of people. We need 1/3 more people just so people could work 40 hours a week. So where do you make up for those lack of bodies? People like me work 90 hours a week. That's where you make it up. The amount of overtime is insane. I could literally work every hour of the week if I wanted. Literally. There are people in my company that work so much, the company has to call them and be like, you are being forced to take a week vacation because you've worked every day for the past 3 months. 24/7. And so it's anybody. And the qualifications for the job are like you have to be able to pass a background check, right? And you have to, I think, have your GED for my company. I don't even know if you need that. How do you make sure you get the wee guy as a client? Well, it depends. In that first company I was in, you just told them, this is the type of person I would be willing to work with. Doesn't always work that way. You know, and then one of the things that'll happen is, and it's so think about this then, right? God damn, I don't know why I'm talking about this. Okay, so think about this scenario. Let's say you're a person that has some challenging behaviors. You've fought with staff, the police have been called, but you're aware of it, right? So you're conscious enough, you're aware. So what'll happen is a house that's more challenging or staff's less likely to stick around for a long time. So they constantly need someone to come in and do overtime. And what'll happen will be people will beg not to work that house. Well, I'll do overtime, but I'm not doing John's house. I won't work with John. I won't do that. Or you get... So what they'll do is they do what's called pulling you. So my contract that I signed says my job's not to work at the specific house that I usually work at. My job is I'm required to work a set of hours. For me, it's Sunday at 10 p.m. till Wednesday at 2 p.m. That's my average 40-hour shift because I don't get paid for the sleep shifts, right? So that's my average 40 hours being on the clock. They could theoretically call, let's say, Imaginarium works at my company. They could say, hey, Imaginarium, can you work an extra 40 hours at John's? And he'd say, no, I don't want to work at John's. It's tough. And they'd go, well, would you work at the house Rob normally works at? We'll say that client's name's Bill. Would you go to Bill's? And you'd Imaginarium, you'd say, sure, Bill's easy. We'll just sit around and play Wii Bowling. Sounds great. So then they'll call me and they'll say, hey, Rob, you're going to John's for 40 hours. Someone else is coming in to work with Bill. Now I'm pissed because I work with Bill every week, and now it sucks some random stranger comes in, and it's not fair to Bill. Now Bill's got to deal with random people that he's never met that are working as his staff and his stable staff meet, and it's not fair to John because now poor John's in a situation where I'm going to be in there grumbling, I don't want to be in this house sucks, blah, blah, blah. So the whole thing's a shit show. It really does. That's what happens when you don't have enough employees, right? You end up with this constant shuffling. And what happens is there's a lot of people that are challenging, but what you find is when you could get consistent staff that care about them, they actually improve significantly. But how do you ever get to that point of consistent staff if you don't hire enough people to be there and you have someone rotating every week? Then it's not consistent. You know, so it gets crazy. Yeah, and it takes a lot of an emotional toll on you as a worker, and certainly as the clients it would take. But it's not like digging. I always tell my wife, like, I gotta go dig ditches. Back will be sore. It's not physically intensive at all. It's emotionally intensive, and it's not for everyone. Right? There's people that are great people that just are not cut out for it. Can you get smacked in the face and not raise your hand and hit them back? Most people's reactions, you hit me, I hit you back. And sometimes it happens so fast that it's a reflex. But you have to train yourself. You can't do that. You can't. By the way, am I on Twitch? And they say, oh, yeah, okay, that worked. So if you're just joining on Twitch, I was talking to Destiny, which I couldn't. We're basically talking about my line of work and how it applies to homelessness. But, yeah, it's complicated, man. But at the end of the day, for as sad as I'm making it, I don't know if I've told this story before, but it is my favorite story of work. Keep in mind, my job before this, the jobs I had was like working at Burger King. I was a paper boy way back in the day. Worked at a Christmas tree farm, trimming trees. Was an assistant debate coach. Worked as a bartender. I'm sure I'm missing a couple there. But I never had like a career. This is the first job I had where I really felt like I was making a positive difference, like in a big way in people's lives. My favorite day of work was I had this client, and there was a client that was in Polk and had a reputation for interactions that could get violent with staff, with doctors, with nurses, etc. And we had to go to get a medication delivered or administered like once a month. every 28 days, in fact. And it was outside of my scope of training. So it was injections that I was not trained to give. So we had to have a nurse give the injection. And it just so happened that the nurse that worked with my client also worked with him in some of those bigger facilities. And she had told us this, and we'd seen this nurse every day or every month for, I don't know, 5-6 years. Every month, see the same nurse. And she's getting older, and eventually she's retiring. And we went in. It was the last day of work for her that we would see her. She maybe had 2 or 3 days left, but we weren't there every day. We're only there once a month. And as always, my client's talking her ear off. She liked bicycling, so they talked a lot about bicycling. And he's like Norm from Cheers. He talks to everyone. Everyone loves him. So he's talking to her, and then, okay, we see you. And then he's talking to the nurses out here. And the nurse that gave the injection pulled me aside and said, "Can I talk to you for a second?" I said, "Sure." And she just said, "Hey, it was a pleasure to work with you, and I'm retiring and everything." I said, "Yeah, happy retirement. It was great to work with you." And she says, "I just want to let you know, when I used to work with him in the facility, I was scared to death of him. I didn't want to be in a room with him. And now he's my favorite person to see." And to me, that was the best day that I ever worked, because it was like, I could see that positive change. So, I'm a fucking idiot here. So, anyways, now we're going to go on to Jimbob's panel, and we're going to talk about making fun of people and stuff like that. It'll be a good time. I can't wait. But, yeah, it's a good feeling when you see that someone's life has improved so much that they went from being scary to members of the public to probably the most popular guy I've ever met. Like, anywhere we go, this guy is the most popular guy. He's hilarious. He's loved by the community. Like, everyone. If you go a week, like if we do something, we go to a ball game instead of our... Also, routine's very important for a lot of the people. So we have like the same schedule. 4 o'clock, we like to go to JCPenney and shop. 5 o'clock, we like to stop into this store. So if you miss a day, because it's like we did something special, we went to a pirate game or something. Like, you'll go in the next day and everyone's like, "Where were you? We missed you yesterday." Stuff like that. So it's pretty cool when you could see, someone that's now that important part of the community. And it's not just me. The other guy it's so weird now. The guy that's my coworker, the other one that's there, he is 10 years older than me and 10 years younger than my dad. And he basically grew up as basically my cousin. So he's like a weird, like, young uncle for me, 10 years older than me. And he's excellent with the client as well. That's who's working right now. But he's been working... So I took last week off, so he's on like an 11-day stretch. So I go in to relieve him tomorrow. I'm sure he'll be ready to get home. Yeah, that happens, John, yeah. I was talking to the same Destiny that's banned on Twitch, but that's over. That was on YouTube. I couldn't show it on Twitch. So I'm going to be doing a panel with Jimbob. I forget who else is on this panel, but it was some people I'd heard of, so it should be good. I'm looking forward to it. I don't know exactly. I don't think it's necessarily here. I'm going to be on with Chad Jackson, Hake or Hake. I don't know. I'll put the link if you guys wouldn't mind sharing the link. Yeah, I like Jimbob. I think he's funny. But yeah, we'll be doing, that's going to be 6 o'clock. And then I don't know how long that's supposed to go. And then when that ends, we will probably end the stream for the night. Maybe I'll stream some tomorrow. I haven't decided. But how is everyone's day going as we wait like 10 minutes before I get into the green room here? Doing well? I saw Aftershock briefly. He's probably working or pretending to work. Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm reading some emails here. Nothing important. Nothing important. Nothing. Okay, good deal. Okay. Watching this Amaranth financial audit video. Yeah. Well, luckily, I will say, the money I get from Twitch and YouTube and stuff, it's nice. It really is. But I'm not getting rich, obviously. The only time that it sucks is around tax season because I'm used to just always having a job that takes taxes out every month. So I always get a refund. But now with this, what ends up happening is I still get a refund federally, but I'll end up paying into the state. And so it's actually, tax season's a little more difficult to actually go through and... Did my wife have a nice time at the wedding? It was a bachelorette party. But yes, she had a nice time. Though she did fall and whack her knee, and now her knee's a little bruised. I think she's hamming it up, is what I think. But no, she had a lot of fun. And we talked a lot. Did a lot of FaceTiming, so she could talk to me and the Hank man. So they're actually doing Easter eggs at her mom's right now. It was scheduled yesterday, and I'd already had this planned with Jimbob. So that's why... I decided to do this. 14 hours in and still not at 1948. Fear and loathing in Israel. What a topic, right? What'd y'all think? I rewatched today. I had to do a lot of driving for work. I rewatched portions of my debate with Hutch last night because sometimes I will admit there was one time where I was being interrupted where I did say something that came out wrong, where I said, you're saying the gay people couldn't molest children or don't molest children. What I was trying to say is per capita is much, but I didn't get those words out. But other than that, it really was a shit show. Again, it's one thing to say, I find your position despicable, terrible, wrong. That's one thing. It's a completely different thing and a source of frustration to me, stylistically, how people debate. It's incredible to me when little shit like, and I know this is so weird. Maybe it's like a total irrationality on my part, but Aftershock's in here. So I'll give you one of the huge pet peeves I have of mine is when someone says something and they're like, I didn't say that. Now, I'm not saying Hutch did exactly that. It was a little different. But, like, you remember there was this guy, like, talking to GSU Gambit. And it's weird because it came up again recently. I enjoyed talking to him. Him and Aftershock had an argument. Aftershock's a fucking grown man. I don't have to fight his fights. I don't have to fight Andrew Wilson's fights. I don't have to fight Destiny's fights. None of it. None of them. Every single person I interact with on here, to my knowledge, is an adult. I don't have to fight their fights. You might hate Aftershock. I like Aftershock. You and Aftershock might get in a big fight. It's irrelevant to me. I'm not getting in between it. Period. End of story. So GSU and Aftershock had to fight. Whatever. I'm out of it. Don't care. Right? What upsets me is when GSU Gambit allegedly said that because our friend, he goes by a different name now, so I'll say Cut Sleeves was what he went by then. But when my friend Cut Sleeves, who happened to be black, who I enjoyed talking to, not just because he was right wing, but also I enjoyed talking to Cut Sleeves because he was actually getting into policy debate in college, which is something I did. And so it was interesting to talk to someone, that had a hobby, was getting into a hobby that I knew a little about. And GSU, because Cut Sleeves was sort of, I can't remember the specifics, but I think sort of against Black Lives Matter was basically what it came down to. GSU Gambit thought that made him like a sellout, black man. He sold out the black community, or he was young and naive and stupid. And GSU Gambit basically said that I brought on a, quote, young, dumb black man to exploit. That's what he said. And so that's what was alleged said. And so GSU Gambit, I brought him on the show, and Aftershock was on there. I was like, did you say this? No, I didn't say it. Didn't say it. for like 40 minutes, didn't say it. And I'm trying to look allegedly for this video where he said it. And then I found it. It was on Fanatic Stream. And that's exactly what he said. He said the people that brought them on, and that's what I said. It's like, you didn't mention me by name, but you said the person that booked him and brought him on was doing so to exploit a young, dumb black guy. Well, he thought it was Aftershock. He didn't know it was me, that I was the one who invited Cut Sleeve. I'm like, so you're saying I exploited a young, dumb black guy? No, I never said that. Didn't say that. And then when I found out he said it, he was like, well, of course I said it. And that pissed me off because it's not just that he said it. That's not the problem. It's that he made me waste an hour of my life looking for it, as opposed to just saying, yeah, I said it, let me explain. That's it. That's similar to what Hutch is doing last night, where it's like, I fucking hate where people can't just admit the smallest thing. Like, just admit, yeah, okay, yeah. It's not like, it's like, if I say, like, well, do you think it's possible for an LGBT family to emotionally abuse their child if they come out as straight? If they wanted them to be, you could say, like, I've never heard of it, but sure, I guess that's possible. How does that ruin Hutch's argument? Is it like, oh, Hutch loses? Of course not. In fact, I'm doing the exact same thing on the other side. Isn't it true that straight couples could, abuse their kid if they come out as gay? Yep. Without hesitant, I answer. And so what it just shows to me, what it exhibits to me is someone who's not interested in having a truthful conversation. It's someone that's more interested in, oh, what's he going to say? How can I counter this point? Which is fine if you're playing a game of debate like I did in college. You're engaged in the policy debate community. Fine, no problem. No one says you have to argue what you believe. But when we're having a discussion on these spaces, and the implication is, unless expressly said otherwise, that we're all saying what we actually believe, and you're exhibiting through the stylistic choices you're making in debate that that's not the case, then why would I take anything you're saying seriously? Another part of the debate where he does this, where I say, do you think trans 2 or 3 years old can be transgender or have a gender identity, form their gender identity? Him, ha, no. That's what he says. He's mealy-mouthed, but he eventually says no. I said, okay. Well, given that, then if a parent says my kid is trans, that's clearly the adult putting it on the 2-year-old child, because the child can't make that choice. Then he goes, blah, 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 blah. That's not what the scientific literature says. But you just said the opposite of that. You just said, no, they can't be trans. Now you're saying, but the scientific literature says they're trans. And I'm like, okay, would you like to clarify what your answer is? Then he gives this weird third answer that's somewhere in between those two. And it's like, what am I responding to? And then he'll constantly interject when I try to respond. He'll go off for like 2-3 minutes, and it's like, okay, I'll try to respond. And he interjects. That's not what I said. Blah, 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 yelling new questions. And it's like, what is the utility then? What are we getting out of this debate? And like when I go back and I listen to parts of it, it's like, oh yeah, the reason I brought this up was I wanted to say this, but I never get to say that because instead we get in this 30-minute conversation rolling back. Well, what did Hutch actually say? Well, Todd, he said that when he was in 4th grade that his teachers taught him about masturbation and that he... Now listen, full disclosure, that doesn't make Hutch a monster. If your teacher did that to you, that means that your teacher sexualized you. So you're not the monster. What's monstrous is then saying, and by the way, I think that's good. We should teach 9-year-olds. Yeah, just in time for Jimbob's panel. It's going to be good. That's fucking crazy. And the funny... Well, that's the point Aftershock, right? Like, yeah, it's not if you're like, yeah, I'm a victim. It's if you say, yeah, that's a good thing and I want it to happen more. Then that's the problem, right? And the funny thing is, how do we get into that conversation? Because the whole spiel is me saying that there are inappropriate sexualization and gender ideology and blah, blah, blah of all these teachers that are going on to our schools. And he's like, no. And then he literally exemplifies exactly what I'm talking about the problem is. Yeah, I think he got groomed too. That's what I think. But that doesn't mean you should support other people getting groomed. Jimbob's was a chaotic? Isn't Jimbob? I'm doing Jimbob's panel here in 5 minutes. What are you talking about? Did he do a different show I'm unaware of? It says 6 p.m. Eastern time. Yeah, I know. I can't wait to roast some lefties. And it's fucking crazy because here's the thing. You want to know the thing? One of the reasons I hate talking about that topic is how consistently disappointed I am. Right? Because it's like, oh, here's a lefty to spar with. Even if I don't like them, even if I think their ideas are shit, that's fine. I'm having fun. Like when I was talking to food shops. Okay, Randy. Well, when Jimbob's ready, I'll send me the invite. Like when I ended up talking to food shops, not a very good debater. I'm kind of smacking around, but I'm having fun. Some crazy young lefty, blah, 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 blah. Fun. And then he's like, oh, and by the way, if I had a friend that was sexually attracted to my 2-year-old child, I'd let them babysit them. Now it's not fun. It's not fun at all. It's fucking disgusting. Then the rest of the debate, I'm like, let's just move on. But it's in my head, the whole rest of the debate. You know? Part of me wants to engage with people that I completely disagree with, but there's somewhere I could find a kernel of something that I like. I don't want to just engage with people that I'm completely disgusted with. I want it to be, even if I think you're shit and your arguments are garbage, there's something I could latch on to say, well, it's a person that I could at least say, okay, there are good qualities there. But how can I do that if you say shit like that? And it's like when that came out. And then furthermore, to like the whole like, oh, Rob, what's wrong? You don't like licking nipples? Fuck you, man. If you want to make it personal like that, no problem. And, you know, and then he tries to get all on his high horse. Oh, you like beating children. Show me anywhere that I remotely said anything about that. I could show your exact words saying, I want to teach 9-year-olds about masturbation. I want to teach 9th graders about licking nipples. You said it, not me. I didn't say I want to physically assault children. So for you to try to be like, oh, I'll just accuse you of stuff. I didn't say that. Yeah, Aftershock, if someone's doing things like overtly sexual and stuff like that, use your judgment. If you want to ban them, that's fine. I would warn first. But the idea of like, if it's a normal viewer of mine and you think they're stepping out of line a little, clearly have not as tight of a leash. But if it's something like that, like there were people that were coming in from his audience saying like, I hope child services gets called on Rob. He probably beats his children. Fuck that. Don't fucking talk about my child. Fuck you. That to me is over the line. You know, so all right, I think we're getting ready to go. So you might lose me visually here. In fact, you're going to. See, now it's better without seeing my ugly face, right? Good stuff. What is this shit? Those stats you connect with YouTube. Never had that happen. Oh, shit. Weird. Okay, we're getting into the green room here. There we go. Continue as robnoerr. Unmute. Start cam. Check. All right. Oh wow, what a setup here, guys. I'm still here, everyone.
All right. Hey, what's up, Chad?
Hey, what's going on, man?
How are you doing? Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Chad, this is robnoerr. This is Chad Jackson.
Hey, robnoerr, how are you?
Doing great, Chad Jackson. It's great to talk to you.
You as well.
And here's Hake, right on time. You guys' punctuation is epic.
Because we don't have any lefties, I'm assuming.
Could be.
Every panel I ever do, whoever the lefty with the biggest clout is the last person there.
Late.
Every
Yeah,
single time.
That makes sense. I try to get more lefties on, but it's hard. I don't know. It's hard to reach some of them that are the impactful ones. I'm trying to get JJ McCullough on, but a lot of these people don't want to get into scenarios where it might get contentious and turn into like even a mild debate or something. But I try to keep this pretty fun for the most part. Sometimes it goes into heavier stuff, but this one's particularly light. We're going to cover some basic things going on.
Someone told me they just came from your channel. Were you just streaming? Someone said it was
I
a
just
little
did an
heated.
epic. Oh yeah, it was a big epic stream. This guy who just calls basically anyone who takes a position of a Christian position and somehow influencing it in government. Now, if you just generally call that Christian nationalism, what they do is they just equate Christian nationalism with like Nazism immediately, and then you go, okay, what's the comparison here? And then the guy couldn't tell us, right? It was just a generalization, and we agree that a theocracy or something horrific could be possible from that top-down view or something, but we're trying to figure out the distinction between just calling it that, and he wasn't budging on anything, right?
Of course.
Who was this?
Is this dude? He's not a notable person. He just made a video about me, and so I don't have the low-hanging fruit rule. I'll go after anyone who puts my name in something, and I'll ask them on the stream though too. I won't just make fun of them.
It is the unbigoted position. The position of, if you're willing to put yourself out there, then I will give you the courtesy of treating you like everyone else. So I don't want to hear, but I'm really just a 16-year-old kid that was making fun of you guys.
Right.
Tough shit.
Yeah.
Then you shouldn't have ran your mouth. Like, that's the way I look at it.
Right. Yeah. So that that occurred. But it was good. It was good. It's like when people call you something horrific or something that tries to smear you, it's in this day and age with the technology, it's great to just go, hey, I'm, come over here. Here's the StreamYard link. Never before what'd you have to do? Write letters to people, show up on their doorstep. Now it's great. Someone says something on Twitter, you go right to them. Now you can do that with politicians too, but we'll get into that too. We're gonna get in. So everyone's sound is good. Anyone peaking from your view?
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
That's
4.
good for me.
Testing,
That's good for me.
1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
And Rob?
Test. 1, 2, 3. Test.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'll run the intro. I'll bring you up individually, and you can introduce yourselves, and we'll just kind of free form into various topics, and we'll probably start with Rob, okay, coming off of Tim Pool. All right?
Sounds good.
All right, cool. See you in a second, you guys. All right, welcome back to Mixed Bag. This is number 8, I believe, if I have the number correctly. Excuse my background. I was just ranting about atheism for 4 hours straight. This Mixed Bag, we're getting back our favorite, Chad Jackson. Welcome, chat. Please give a warm welcome to Chad Jackson. Hello, Chad.
Hey, thank you for having me back for another episode of Mixed Bag. Always a pleasure.
Awesome.
Yeah, looking forward to getting into it.
Thank you so much. I think Chad has earned potentially an emoji. I'm going to get on that. This is his third Third appearance, I might have to get a base chat emoji with maybe even the pipe or something. But in the meantime, W's in the chat. A warm welcome to Chad. Okay. Also coming back, Hake. Thanks for coming back, Hake. You're a busy dude, but I'm glad that you made the time to jump on at such short notice. Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to be on again, and nice to see you, Chad, as well. See you again, Chad Jackson.
All right. Robnoerr, welcome. First time panelist to the show. Thanks for jumping on, Rob. You're also probably going to be more and more busy. I hope that's the case. Rob, introduce yourself and where they can find you. I think we've established the other two.
Yeah, Robnoerr, populist conservative. I focus mostly on corruption, debating lefties, doing stupid left-wing panels, things like that. I'm on YouTube, Twitch, all those places. If you look up my name, Noerr, you'll find it there. Usually stream weeknights around 7 p.m., 8 p.m. Eastern. I am happy to be here. Little known fact, last year I was doing a 24-hour stream, and my favorite guest that I had on was actually Jimbob, who came on to help make that stream a little more bearable, brought a little levity to the situation.
Hey, Rob, have you done one of those before? Again, because I did my first 6-hour stream yesterday, but it was an accident and it wasn't on purpose. And I was wondering, whether or not you do that, because it is a specific kind of breed of stream, isn't it?
Yeah, I try to do them every major election. So I did one 2018, 2020, 2022. So I'll be doing one again, and I'll probably be hitting you up for 2024. Try to do it like 2 weeks before the election to try to get support for the most bearable candidates that we can find.
Right.
Is usually how it works.
Right.
So.
So congrats, by the way. You just came off of Tim Pool. That's a huge thing. Now, it doesn't always transfer immediately, but it's really great that you're on there, and I hope you return there. What can you give us a highlight of the key topics you brought to maybe the largest platform? Is that maybe the largest platform you've been on?
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, give us a quick rundown of more of the highlights, and then maybe we can all respond to some of the issues.
So it's kind of interesting. I was supposed to do his Culture War podcast, which is his morning show, which is on Tenet Media. That show is usually getting maybe 10,000 live viewers at a time. And then I did his late show. I hung around afterwards. We played poker, and he said, "Do you want to be on the late show?" The late show, I'll be honest, the topics, it was not geared towards me. I was just sort of a second guest. So we talked about Boeing. We talked about Israel, Palestine, which I barely got a word in because Tim and the guest were going at it. We talked about the idea of having an inner monologue. The topics I wanted to talk about with Benjamin Wingarten, that was the other guest in the morning, was we talked about the ideas of corruption and lawfare being used by the FBI and the Democrats to go after Trump. So particularly that day was the Fani Willis decision where she was allowed to stay on the case, but either her or Nathan Wade, her lover, had to leave the case. And then we talked a little about sort of what I thought was the enthusiasm for why people in my neck of the woods in rural Pennsylvania love someone like Donald Trump, because they felt they've never had any. This is what people don't understand about Trump. It's not that people felt that, oh, he loves me. It's that people felt he doesn't hate me. That's how low the bar is for people where I live in rural Pennsylvania. They feel that no one has stuck up for them in 30 years. And here's this Manhattanite billionaire that at least is saying, like, hey, I like you guys. That was enough to get them to crawl over broken glass. So those were sort of the things we talked about.
Now, that you said populism, that's interesting. The big epic stream I just came off of, this, the conflation was like populism itself is some terrible thing. And really what you're pointing to is just a consolidation of the ordinary man, basically, and their ordinary problem, right? Is that what we're referring to?
Yeah, and I've had people argue with this to me with like, well, they sort of gatekeep. The term means nothing to me. Like, I have people tell me all the time, you're not really a Republican. Good. Like, most of them suck. That's fine. You can say that. Populism to me, what I'm just saying is wanting the government to represent the actual people. So I think the central problem with our politics is that institutions, not elected officials, actually control them, and that they are corrupt. And so if I'm sitting here talking to a lefty and we want to argue about Medicare for all, which I'm vehemently against, it's an irrelevant conversation, because no matter who of us is more persuasive and who we push for at the ballot box, you better hope the FBI agrees with you. You better hope that a bunch of unelected institutional bureaucrats in social media, corporate America, academia, the entertainment industry, you better hope they agree, because they're the only voices that matter. So when I say populist, what I'm saying is I want to fight back against that corruption, and sometimes that means that I'm not the most conservative or the most Republican or the most libertarian. To me, it's the central thought is the idea of fighting back against that corruption.
Right. This is a good question. Isn't it a major threat to our democracy?
Bill Hicks, one of my favorite comedians. Yeah, that's what they say. So the Mike Benz, if you follow him, he was talking about. I won't go into a big spiel here, but he's talking about how the CIA, etc., used to love free speech on the internet. They loved that until they saw in 2016 that it could be used back home and it could go for a populist candidate. What he says is the way that these institutions define democracy is it's hard to get the CIA on board with corporate America, on board with the NSA. And so to them, that's democracy, getting all of these institutions together. Your vote and my vote is anti-democratic because it takes away their democracy. So when they say something's a danger to democracy, what they mean is it's a danger to our hegemonic power, which we call democracy.
Right. I want to get your take, Hake, on this. We keep referring to democracy and even our foreign policy, which I'm pretty ignorant to, on a general marketing scale. It's kind of like push democracy, whether it's right or left, that this is somehow inherently a good thing. And obviously it could be an ambiguous term, democracy. Obviously, we're not referring to direct democracy, but this is why I like to get into it. It's like, are we getting to a point where even the term democracy is not as palatable? I see there's problems, especially how Rob just pointed out that populism, referring to the representatives of government that then influence government and policy, represent the wants or the desires or the values of the given people. Now, we live in a diverse country, right? Diverse in culture, language, food, values, religion. And we're raised to think, well, this is the beautiful thing about America. And whether you think that's beautiful or not, and whether it's workable insofar as democracy or populism is concerned, I think is a decent question to ask. What do you think about that, Hake?
I totally agree, because I sometimes look on the internet and read what people say. And the most sensible people on the internet are saying that democracy is not desirable because it's mob rule. And like you pointed out, the people are lacking in values. Many of the people are lacking in values. People like robnoerr, who still has some basic moral values and common sense and working and stuff.
Yeah, right.
A few, a little bit. Normal people's values aren't represented except for a little bit by Donald Trump. The rest of them, they play like so many people play like we're Christians or play like we love the country, but then when push comes to shove, they fold. And so many people in life are folding, and we have this diverse world where people, the young dumb people don't have our values, and they want them voting, and they want the children of these immigrants and illegals voting, and many of them are more corrupt than their parents who come here. Their parents come here kind of humble, trying to follow the law, respecting police a little bit, knowing that our country is better than where they came from. And then their children grow up spoiled and brainwashed against white people by the government. Mm-hmm. And so we don't have good people voting, and we don't have good people representing us.
Chad, what's your take on that? And I also want you to answer a follow-up question about voting. Whether or not, and I think that we talked about this before, but I want to get your back and forth maybe with Rob here on this, is that, first of all, democracy, tag on to what we're talking about, but then the question of, is it a good idea for everybody to vote? If not, why?
Well, no, it's not a good idea for everybody to vote. I don't believe in this kind of universal enfranchisement of everybody. I believe that we should enact very rigorous rules when it comes to who gets to vote. I believe you have to be an owner of property. You have to be male. You have to be able to pass a litmus test that examines your to what extent you actually understand the Constitution. Because what tends to happen is you get a lot of these politicians, these candidates who are running for office, and they're making all of these promises that aren't even constitutional. But your average American citizen doesn't even know the difference as to whether what they're promising you is actually constitutional or not. And they fall for it, and nobody says anything about it. The media pipes these people up, and they win public office. This happens on both the Republican and the Democrat side. And so if we had people who actually took their citizenship seriously, voting, men who are proper or owners of property, I think we would be in a much better place as a country. As far as this whole populism thing, that's a word that I hear thrown around a lot by a lot of people. But when I ask for the definition of what the word means, I get mixed answers. So I don't know that there is a collective understanding of exactly what that word means. And with all due respect to Rob, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. This is a dialogue. Uh, to me, it sounds like what you're saying has a tinge of utilitarianism in it, where I am willing to become liberal or conservative or whatever it is you want to call it. I don't really marry myself to a specific political ideology, so long so long as I'm meeting the ultimate goal of getting rid of government corruption. And so, for example, in the early 1900s with muckraking journalism, where you had a lot of these journalists who were themselves socialists, and they were writing all of these articles trying to expose the industrialists as greedy capitalists who are exploiting the worker, who are using child labor, and society, specifically the worker, is suffering as a result of this. Well, as it turns out, a lot of these muckraker journalists were lying about the conditions that they were supposedly exposing. And, to the extent that one calls himself a populist for the end goal of getting rid of corruption, where is the line if one isn't, marrying themselves to any kind of fixed moral understanding of how to go about these things? Hopefully that question makes sense.
Yeah, no. First off, you don't have to say with all due respect. No respect due. I don't care whatsoever. But no, I appreciate. So I would say this. Let's say that we would all agree that there is an issue that is the biggest issue in our country. Let's say that we would take something like the sexualization of children in schools, right? And let's say that I have two people running for office in my district for school board. One is someone who's a fiscal conservative, who goes to the same church as me, who is, against gay marriage, who, checks all the boxes for what you would consider averagely a conservative. The other is the exact opposite. They question whether or not we should have guns in the way that we do and, a bunch of other things. However, the one that goes to my church is like, I have no problem with the sexualization of children in school. And the one that's liberal on most of the things would say, actually, I have a huge problem with that. What I'm saying is I'm basically a single issue voter. I take that issue of corruption as first and foremost. I am willing to take allies on positions that I don't agree with normally, like people on the left. So someone like an Aaron Mattei, a Jimmy Dore, a Glenn Greenwald, a Michael Schellenberger, a Matt Taibbi. These are all people that are incredibly on the left, with many of their domestic and foreign policies I would disagree with, but they understand the corruption of institutions like the FBI. What I'm saying is I don't not have a moral underpinning. I have my values, I have my beliefs, I have my philosophical understanding of how I operate, and I don't shift on that. However, when I say I'm a populist first and foremost, I guess that's just my way of saying I'm single issue on wanting this corrupt government to get out. So I would turn the question to you. Would you be willing, let's say that I'm guessing here, and you could let me know if I'm wrong, but if, for example, a return to voting rights, as if you're suggesting, would you be willing to support a candidate who you disagreed with on fiscal policy, who you disagreed with maybe on First Amendment or Second Amendment issues, who was strongly for saying, but only these male landowners should vote? Would you support them over someone who agreed with those other policies more than you, but said, I completely disagree with your way of voting?
The conditions that you lay out, or the merits of this proverbial or hypothetical candidate that you lay out, isn't enough to satisfy my decision as to whether or not I'll vote for them. It's actually more complex than that. I'll have to do more digging into who they are, into the reason as to why they are making such an effort. But yeah, I mean,
Well, see, for me,
I get your point.
I guess that would be sort of my area of disagreement with you is I could vote for a person of, for example, I would say poor moral character who was agreeing with the issue of me for the wrong reasons, right? Who would do so for self. So in the example I just gave you, let's say that the lefty person that is for those voting things is because he's like, in my community, there's a bunch of Christians that don't own land and I'll get their vote out. So I'm doing it for immoral anti-Christian. I would still support that person, even knowing that that was their reasoning. If I believed that issue was important enough, and I actually believe, dude, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot because
Okay, hold on. Rob, but hold on. But if you said your ultimate goal, even from a utility view, is to get corruption out, aren't you voting for someone in the short term who gives you an outcome, but in the long term is already set up character-wise to be corrupt?
Well, but it would be the opposite. In the long term, they've set up the system that voting will now ensure that the corrupt get ousted, because now the voting system would be radically changed. Now, it would have to make sense that this. Let me put a caveat here. If this person was like,
you're a pragmatist.
Well, right. If this person, if the caveat would be this, if this person would have no chance to get that bill passed, right? It's just a pie in the sky dream. Then no, I wouldn't vote for them because now I'm putting someone in there with views that are antithetical to me. But if I thought this had a chance to be a deciding vote on radically changing the system, so therefore elections going forward would be more favorable to the ideals that I wanted, then yes, I would bite that bullet to have some guy in office for 2 or 4 years that elsewise I disagree with, but has radically changed the system to ensure now, next time the people that vote are going to be people that have more of a concern of constitutionality, and someone like him will be ousted because it's clear that he doesn't have those constitutional views.
Okay, I'm gonna ask Hake to answer this. Stanley of $5. Thanks you so much for that super chat. What qualifications does the average moron have, that's me, to make an educated decision on who should run a multi-trillion economy and nuclear military? It's a decent question.
That is a really decent question. I think that's probably goes a little bit to Chad Jackson's point of landowners. When he said property means land, he doesn't just mean, oh, this is my property, my cell phone, and I get to vote.
Also, are we talking about loan owners, debt owners?
Good question. Yeah, no, maybe they can't be. I don't know, but when you own property, or when you own a business, say, when you are responsible for different things, you get a little bit more of the world, a real education. When you're working versus when you're just going to school, a working person is going to have a little bit more knowledge of dealing with people in the real world, quote unquote, as opposed to this sheltered, spoiled life of brainwashed liberalism.
Yeah, it sounds like, how Peterson says it, like reality is, in touch with the consequences. It sounds like what you're saying is people who own land or have ownership of things, they have to take care of it. Like, for instance, there are people in our neighborhood who are renters, and the insurance went up for everybody because more people are renting. And the reason is because renters don't take care of property as well as property owners. That's a perfect example. Now, if that's a microcosm for everything else we're talking about, it would be demonstrably true. That people having a stake in something, right? Their feet in the game, the ability to lose, risk, right? Consequence, potentiality of destruction, basically, of their existence. That seems to be something that would be required to vote, right? You have to almost buy into your vote, not monetarily, right? In a sense, it is indirectly monetary, because then this is the problem I have, okay? Chad, if a rich person, rich leftist, right? Tons of money, he starts buying leftist property. I mean, this is a cronyist view. That is, I don't know if it is a full loophole, but it's a partial loophole that still would be a problem. So I'm not saying that because there's one way around it that's ultimately going to destroy it, but that's the kind of thing that gets weird, is that you go, okay, well, can I put my money where I want and buy people houses so they can vote?
No, that's actually a real problem, a real threat. And the thing is, I mean, when it comes to these different ideas, of course, they're not exactly bulletproof. There's always going to be loopholes so long as man is man. But the thing is, what's to stop a conservative billionaire from doing the exact same thing? And so, again, we can talk about all the hypotheticals of the ways in which this system could be compromised or that system could be compromised until we're blue in the face. But the fact is, what the 20th century has shown us is effort from both Republicans and Democrats to enfranchise everybody has not proven to bode well for our country. From a moral perspective, from an economic perspective, like any way you look at it, this whole idea of taking any, Joe Schmo off the street and equipping them with the quote unquote right to vote, I think is a bad idea for a constitutional republic. It just is.
Well, two things real quick to say about this. Maybe something, I don't agree with you on exactly how this will be set, but I agree with your fundamental diagnosis that there has to be stake in the game. There has to be skin in the game. What would you think about this? I've heard people suggest this. How about you have to be a parent to vote? Because parents, like, that are like actual family unit, not like a single dad. I mean, like a parent that you would then have skin in the game because you care about the future of the country. Whereas many people, even if they're landowners, if they're not parents, we see these diabolical positions that they come up with because they don't really care because they don't have a future.
Yeah, but Rob, buying a kid is cheaper than buying property.
Oprah would have a lot of votes.
This is true. No. I don't think that should be a qualifier because we as Americans have proven that simply being a parent doesn't count for anything because most parents in America have their children in public schools. So that in itself is proof to me that a lot of parents don't know what the hell they're doing. If you are going to trust the government to educate your children, I mean, that is proof to me that you're probably not the best decision maker.
Most property owners probably also send their kids to public schools, so I don't think being a property owner. And I'll say that.
How about we? However, to Hake's point, and to Jimbob's point, that it's something psychological that when you own property, you have a vested interest in seeing to it that you are getting a good return on your investment. So you want to make sure that you're putting people in positions of decision making and of authority and of political representation who are going to see to it that you're not basically getting a lemon by the time this thing is said and done. I live here in Texas. There's a town called Duncanville where the majority of the people there are renters. Every bond package that the school board proposes passes. And the fact is, this community is completely in shambles. Their schools are doing terrible. The kids aren't passing like basic math and English. However, their football team is killing it. Their football team, I think, is number one in the state. So they are putting all this money, these taxpayers are, these renters are, into things that aren't important. Whereas in neighboring towns where the majority of the people are actual owners, they actually have a pretty solid education in their respective districts. And so again, it's a difference in terms of what the priorities are based upon people who have stake in the game or their feet planted in the game, as Jimbob put it, versus those who don't.
Well, let me just put,
yeah, I mean, part of that is to that point too. If you own land and you're able to keep it, that's a proving of yourself. You gain some wisdom from that sometimes, at least in a worldly sense, for basic function of life in society. Then you have a kid. You're not necessarily raising the kid right, but you're still going to have the kid is still going to be alive, so you don't lose your right to vote. Whereas if you own land, you lose your
right,
land, you lose your business.
If you lost, that's true. Yeah, if you lost your land. Right.
It's an interesting. I think maybe the solution would be that there are multiple sets of criteria, so there are options other than just being a landowner. But let me say this: one of the problems with this, again, I agree with the fundamental principle, which is not everyone should vote. Right? We should have a system where you have to have some sort of competency or skin in the game to be able to do that. The problem with all the theories that we'd be able to come up with is it's the same problem with term limits. Like when I ran for Congress, like what do you think the chances are of getting a bunch of Congress people that are reliant on their job for their income to vote themselves out of a job? it's not going to happen. And the same is like the things we're talking about here. But what would you all think to this is a good first starting step? If we agree with the principle that there has to be some minimal amount of effort before someone could vote, here's something that I propose that hopefully we could all agree is a good starting point. How about you have to vote in person on the day of the election? If you don't have enough skin in the game to get your butt up to the polling place and to actually vote that day, your vote should not count, barring some medical ailment or something like we used to. To me, that is the exact principle that you're using here goes along with why mail-in ballots is such a bad idea, because most of these mail-in ballots are being ballot harvest where it's literally like people are going into these places like, hey, here's a bunch of ballots, fill this out really quick, I'll take it and drop it off. It's not even the bare minimal of thought going in to who you're voting for. At least if you set a bar of you actually have to get up and go to the polling place, that takes a lot of those people that have no interest whatsoever that are just submitting ballots because it's too easy out of the game. Would you all be for a starting point of that?
I like the idea. It reminds me of what happened with the 2020 election. We used to have high propensity voters, the people who had the self-discipline on some level to show up and vote. And then in 2020, we had mail-in voting, and you could go to any old precinct at any old time for days and days and days. And we had every idiot voting liberal. So, and it was the most secure in history, by the way.
Of course.
And so, yeah, I agree with that. I think.
I wonder if we would be biased if suddenly, Christians somehow infiltrated and took over all of public education, and we produced more mature, more educated, more based in reality human beings, and suddenly they're 18, and we go, well, actually, I'm kind of okay with 18-year-olds voting now. Like, would we change our mind based on who because currently we go, oh, these kids, they don't know anything. They're leftists. They're totally brainwashed. They're devoid of reality. They have no concept of real-world experience. But the age suddenly might not matter if the culture produced a better, more mature, more advanced human being that's 18, right? But obviously that's a generational problem that you're going to go, okay, Jimbob, let's start that. Good luck. See you in 6 generations, right? Or something like this.
It turns good.
Here's the issue how I see it. Okay. So in the so-called black community, whatever the hell that means, you have these mass get out the vote kind of campaigns that happen every election cycle. And if you turn on urban radio, get your butt to the polls, like
line them up.
You go to church, we need to load up the buses and we need to go to the polls. And so it's like they're practically begging people to go vote. You see the same thing really all over the place. Who's this long-haired dude who is a Republican and is getting
Scott Presler.
People out to Scott Presler. So he's like a darling of the Republican Party. Look at Scott Presler. Look at all the people he's getting out to vote. And to me, like, seeing this kind of makes my stomach turn. Imagine begging people to care about their own country enough to go vote. Imagine that. So it's like you're practically begging these people to care enough to go vote, as if that's going to change something, as if that's going to do anything. These are people who are not motivated to vote. They're not doing their research. They're not looking at the candidates. They're not looking at the issues. But yet, urban radio is telling them, hey, you need to go vote because this is the most important election of our lifetime. And so by the time this warm body makes it to the poll, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to simply do what they're told as far as who to vote for in the same way that they did what they're told in terms of getting to the polls. So if you're not motivated out of your own volition to vote, then you probably shouldn't be voting at all.
Yeah, but you can't
that's how I see it.
You can't see that ground to the left, though. You can't. So what Scott Presler's
It's not about left versus right.
Well,
like, it's about...
How about Christian versus anti-Christian? You can't see that ground to the, secularists, right? Because what happens is if Scott Presler's not playing that game, and if we all decide that we're going to stand on our moral ground and say, listen, we're not going to talk to anyone about voting because if they're too apathetic to actually make a decision on their own and get out there and vote, then we don't want them voting anyways. And all of a sudden we see a blue wave that's like, oh, and now we're going to have policies like we're going to teach books like genderqueer in every kindergarten, and we're going to talk about the importance of abortion in every school even more, and we're going to indoctrinate your children even more, and we're going to take more of your tax dollars, and we're going to have have more foreign conflicts and all this stuff. I don't think that we are able to survive as a society saying that, no, we are so principled. And by the way, this is a problem I think that you see a lot of people that are in Trump's orbit too. They criticize things like mail-in ballots. You won't find a bigger critic of mail-in ballots than me. But as long as the game is rigged like that, you have to play that game. If you stand on principle and say, no, we won't ballot harvest, we're not going to do it.
I disavow, it's not rigged.
Well, yeah, you want to keep
For
your
the sake of
YouTube
the
channel,
channels.
right? It's most secure ever, right? Like, if you don't play the game, then you lose. And then they make the voting even more ridiculous. And then they'll get out the vote even more. And so for me, there is a line that needs to be written where you have to stand on principle. What I think Scott Pressler does is he tells people that were elsewise apathetic why it's important to go vote. Where I live in rural Pennsylvania, everybody just wants to be left alone. That's all they want. They don't care at all about politics. Till COVID locked them down, till their mothers died in nursing homes and they couldn't see them, till their kids no longer could go out and play with their friends, couldn't go to the park and stuff, and started to have all sorts of developmental disabilities. So if there's a person out there saying, like, look, you want to know one of the ways to fight back against this is to get out there and vote for the best possible person. I think that is something that we should be doing.
Well, you make a really good point. So touche. I guess the point that I'm making, yes, admittedly, it is a bit pie in the sky. What I'm saying is, whether it be right or left, this whole idea of getting all these people who wouldn't be voting by their own volition otherwise, but just to get all these warm bodies to the polls, like, I don't think that does any good for society.
Right. You're just saying the general system itself,
Right.
but then Rob's saying the valid point is, well, you can't just leave the void, because we did that with the education system. We said, well, no, don't invade with your ethical system into our public schools. It's secular. Well, secularism is now taking the void. I want to ask this quick before I forget. $20 from Madam. Thank you so much. Curious to hear what you think of weighted voting systems where, depending on vested stake, children, land ownership, business, votes would be more heavily weighted. I know this will never happen. Well, we were talking about whether or not it's just the prerequisite alone, whether or not there's a scale. I think we've already found, like, well, it's hard to navigate this stuff. In fact, it might need to be a proof of concept at a local level that has enough people who are invested, who have land, who have children, whatever the stake is, right? To see if there is a correlate between voting, and maybe, surprisingly to most people, maybe it'll produce a society, even if it's small, of the people who don't vote are relieved that they don't vote. I think that it might be the case with women. We're not there yet. I think more women are realizing, oh, well, I get why you feel like empowered and liberated and equal by voting, but the more they look, and the more they look to their nature when they become mothers, they start to see, oh, this isn't a game I was actually interested to, really to begin with. Once I held my child, once I have the home, once I have this high purpose, right, of being a mother and a caretaker and a wife, suddenly that priority is just kind of like over to the side. It's like it's fodder, right? And so I think more women are noticing that. But I don't know, to this question, did we answer this, or is you think the person asking is asking it more about a gradient scale where the weight gets higher and your vote counts more because you have more stake? Is that kind of what he's asking?
Yeah, that's what it seems like. And so,
Okay.
it's the same play. So all of this would intuit the same fundamental problem that we're seeing, that we want people voting that have some sort of skin in the game. There's different ways we could evaluate that skin. Property ownership would be one. And as Chad said, nothing's going to be perfect. There will always be people trying to game the system no matter what. I think it's an interesting thought. Should people... I mean, you could break it down to something very simply. Should the people that pay more in taxes have more of a vote? Should their vote count more if their taxes are necessary to run the government? It's interesting. I think the best point on this, like, if we really want to be honest with ourselves and have some introspection, particularly when we're talking about concepts like utilitarianism, I think, Jimbob, you make the best point. That's like, well, what does that really mean? If the current system we have now, all of a sudden in 2024, would be a wave of Christians, legitimate Christians winning, and all of a sudden put policies that favored the nuclear family and Christian ideals, would we be complaining? Would we say, okay, that's cool. We're okay with women voting. We're okay with, non-landowner. That's cool. But if we switch to the system of only landowners and it would all of a sudden be incredible secularist winning, would we say then we don't like that system? It's difficult to think about because it's you have to ask yourself, are your principles of how you think the government should run, are they willing to remain unchanged even if the people you hate the most end up getting the reins of power? I don't have the answer to that question. It's difficult.
To me, that stuff, those things are like valid, of course, because human beings are all wicked. But when you look historically over the past 70, 80 years, or maybe more than that, it has been the young, dumb people who've been protesting for all of these evil things like the so-called civil rights movement and all that stuff. And the older people know not to fall for all that stuff. Right. So, and men too, to Jimbob's point, these ladies worrying their pretty little heads about politics on both sides they're miserable. And it hasn't been good for them or anybody else.
Yeah, they don't know what to nurture. They're like, everyone's like, vote, nurture, and they're like, where? And you're like, everywhere. And you're like, oh man, this is too much. Like, where's my child? Where's my home? Like, can I focus inward on that? And the answer is yeah. It was a big mistake in my view. Forget like, should everybody vote? I think it was a disaster to take this just baseline liberal axiom and say, well, everybody gets everything, and that is a flawed egalitarian myth. It doesn't even exist in the way they thought it does, and it's certainly not favoring women or families or the country. And obviously, America is so complex in its variables that it's like we all four of us know that even to the extent we hypothesize and try to make hypotheticals about this stuff, we know we're out of our range of being able to manipulate it in a meaningful way, at least directly. We have to wait, right? We have to put something in place and wait. That's why I think local is the only way, unless you like get modeling, right? But now we're getting into sociology, right? I don't want to get into sociology. I don't want to prove the Christian paradigm should inform our governance based on sociology. That would be ironic, though, wouldn't it?
I don't mind a little wishful thinking and like Ann Coulter said, it's a pipe dream of mine to not have women voting anymore, and these things like only landowners voting. And I really loved Chad's point that people shouldn't be voting. Many people should not be voting because the popular saying is in the mainstream, oh, it doesn't matter who you vote for. It's just important that you vote. Nobody in the mainstream is saying, don't vote. I've heard JLP and I've heard Chad Jackson say, if you don't care or if you don't know, if you don't care enough, don't vote. And that is something that could awaken somebody. And so getting the truth out, even through this, talking about these hypotheticals, can help awaken something in people so that they realize they see things differently. And I think that can bring about some change as well.
This statement is devastating on so many levels. Very concise, SW. Localism has been destroyed by managerialism. Now, forget politics. Let's just look at media. Like, people are like, oh my gosh, look at these people. You've seen the mosaic of all of the people saying the same words, right? And the conspiracy theorists are like, oh my gosh, look at this. It's like the Matrix. Everybody's saying the exact script. That didn't really startle me. It made perfect sense, consistent with the tech we have, that if you wanted to send out a packet, and the reason I'm bringing this up as far as journalism, quote, whatever we have left of that exists, it's very true for journalism that localism has been destroyed by sort of this larger apparatus that then delivers sort of sub packets to every little. I look at it like the lung system, right? The breath comes in and it goes to every little end of the bronchioles or whatever. Local used to be mostly dedicated to what's going on locally. That didn't fully go away. But I would say that the attention economy has pulled people to the higher view of things, right? Even us talking about national we go national, and there is a kind of a trickery there. I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but if you're operating at the national level, right? And all your critique is a national level, and all your participation online, it seems to be toward national. You are kind of missing out on this other part that you can actualize at the local level, but it feels better, I guess, to do it at the national, because you say your piece and it's out there, and you're all commenting on the same paradigm, a national or a world paradigm, right? When Karunka happened, it's a perfect example of how localism was informed by the managerial. What we determined is local, even though I didn't see anyone falling over, I didn't see anyone dying. You know, I don't want to get too into it on YouTube, but it was the most bizarre thing is that we rejected what was happening in front of us at the local level, and a lot of people appealed to the narrative of the national, even though it conflicted with. And this is wild. Like this is so true at the narrative level, but I guess it would be true at the political level too, because here we are. We got to think about the president, you know, as if this thing happens and suddenly years later we finally get what we want, the local. Well, I don't think it's either or. It's some combination of both is what I'm saying. But I'm definitely drawn to local because I can confront people personally and physically. I can find them. I can find where they're speaking. I can confront my teachers, the teachers of the school. You could manipulate matter in front of you. At the national level, it's kind of like this weird. It's kind of like a weird. What do they call it? Multiplayer online game.
Yeah,
in a sense. Yeah.
Really, spectator sports. We're just arguing about something we have no influence over.
Well, it's to
Right,
me, it is for me specifically, and maybe you all could relate to this, given that we put ourselves out here on this space. For me, it's the sin of pride, right? I want to connect to people based on subconsciously. This is true. I want to make a big difference in the world. I have the capability, and to do that, what can we talk about that affects as many people as possible? Well, it's national. It's these grand themes. If I'm really honest with myself, nothing I ever say here, no matter how big I get, will be remotely 1/10 as important as me being a dad, as me being a husband. That's more important than any politics. What happens in my home is
I
easily.
thought you were going to say P. Diddy.
Yeah, that's true too. But all of this, but even local politics, your local politics absolutely more important than your national politics, but your house politics, your relationship with God, your relationship with your wife and your kids, that's infinitely. You might never talk about politics once in your life. This country might go to pot. It really might. But you know where you'll be at the end of time. You know where your family will be. And if you could have that humility to focus on that, and it's ironic because the cheesiest way of saying this was the Jordan Peterson clean your room. And it is cheesy and it's been memed to death. But there's a fundamental truth to you still have things to work on spiritually with yourself and as a family person as yourself and improvements that you could make. I need to lose weight. I need to be a better dad. I need to be a better husband, right? I have to work on all that as enthusiastically as I do when I come on here and I say, what about this corruption that we see with the FBI? And I lose that battle so many times because it's fun and it's entertaining and it's prideful to reach people. And I love smacking lefties around in these debates. I enjoy it. But that hard work, the stuff that really matters, you're right. It is the ultimate form of localism is what you're doing spiritually yourself and what you're doing with your family. And that is the most important.
Yep.
JCIL asks Chad what religion you are.
I'm born again. But I couldn't have said it better myself, Rob, that the truest form of localism is what you do in the home, because what we are fighting against, the four of us on this panel and those who utilize these social media streets, is what we're doing is we're contending with a very elaborate scheme that has been utilized all throughout the 20th century, which Ed Bernays coined as consenting or engineering consent. And so consent is being engineered by way of public education, by way of entertainment, journalism, and we see it even on social media. Engineering consent, engineering people to think a certain way, to reason a certain way, to react to a certain pattern of stimuli, so on and so forth. And so, we are the kind of oddball out who are kind of fighting against the stream and trying to bring about some degree of truth so that way people can hear it. I do that obviously on my own platform, but I do have this kind of attitude of look, if there's one person listening to me and is resonating with what I'm saying, cool. If not, cool. I could be an empty voice in the void, and it doesn't matter so long as I'm actually using my gift to do what God has put me on this earth to do. But when it comes to my household, that's where I'm the most invested. So I couldn't agree with what you said more. This whole idea of localism, though, unfortunately, to SW's point, is true, and it's becoming ever more so that it's kind of vanishing in thin air. Gone are the days of the township, of the local farmer and restaurant owner and plumber and whomever, who are the salt of the earth, breaking the ground to make a living, engaging in free market commerce, and are showing up to the town square to opine on the best way to strengthen our local community. Gone are those days, because what has happened is the locality has in many ways become inextricably intertwined with the federal government. And they do this by way of funding, because a lot of these local communities attach themselves to the federal government because they want the funding. The government then dictates how they use that money and how they run their local towns. You even
including the
see it-
churches.
Exactly.
They can manipulate.
Exactly.
Yeah, we saw that was like the crunka again. We can't say the other
Right.
word. Is that you're playing this game of like, oh, you want the status, you got to pay in. And if you
Right.
want the free money, you also have to do the thing. And so this is how it works. It's essentially like, pay to play in a sense. You're and it's weird because tech itself plays along and it doesn't have an intent. Maybe people who manipulate tech have an intent, but the tech itself just being available, the township, you said, right? It's not just the agency of the township that's being jeopardized by public-private partnerships and NGOs and flooding with funding and saying, okay, if you want this new structure, here we go. You got to keep the flags. You got to do the flag thing. Technology also, the combination of being able to travel, to be able to move, not that it's financially easy to move, but technically it's pretty easy to move, right? So you don't get the men planting their feet, foot under the ground and saying, no, we're here. My family's here and your family's here and your family's here. And I know my neighbors and we've been here, right? Our parents had some of that, right? We know each other. But technology, being able to, with a push of a button, get something shipped to you. Well, suddenly you don't have Rick the milk guy. Not that we ever live with that, but the example holds is that you don't know the bread maker. You don't know these people by their trade, and that's something fundamental for a man, especially, that's being lost. Is our identity as men. It kind of makes sense people are going toward materialism because they're not getting the status exchange. This is our status exchange. Oh, Chad, you do this. Oh, Rob, great job. Hake, I love your show. This kind of thing. This is kind of our sweat. It's not manual labor, but it's in effect a skill set, and we appreciate each other for it. This is lost at the local, where it used to be you knew the butcher, you knew this guy, and that was your exchange, and you bonded. You knew their kids. You knew when their kids were sick. The tech stuff, which I don't think is a battle. I'm certainly not a neo-Luddite or anything, but I don't think you can reverse the effects of it. There's no place to go. You can't just say, you can't, I mean, I guess you could be Amish to what extent they do that, but this is another thing that we kind of overlook, how tech, because we talk about policy and everything Chad just said, but we often maybe miss or just ignore the fact that technology infiltrates these systems, and we trade off our convenience for our sort of our rooted identity with each other as people. But then someone might look at me and go, "Dude, you're just the new boomer." That's all that's happening. And I don't know if they're wrong. I actually don't know if they're wrong. But I do see the change, and it's not like I'm saying we got to get back to. I don't think that's possible either. But it's just something that feels like a loss, especially for men who go out there, and so much of our identity is based in what we do. Like, like I do this and I bring home the bacon and people know me as this. That's kind of gone, at least at that physical level, for a lot of places, not all places.
Well, they're right that you're just a boomer, but it's way more than that, right? Like, because you can point to empirical evidence to show why they're wrong, why it is a big deal. For example, just look at one metric. Look at people in their romantic lives. Look at people in the household. Have we seen with the increase in technology that there is a increase or decreased focus on the nuclear family? Certainly a decrease, right?
Yeah.
So yes, it's absolutely true that when it comes to the community, we're seeing less communication. But when it comes to individual households, all of a sudden we've broken down that real meaning of what a real connection between family members is. And now we have embraced this sort of hookup culture, which is it's the interaction, the human interaction version of materialism, right? Like, I just want a bunch of things just because they're things. I just want a bunch of interactions with people because they're interactions with it. They're gratifying in the moment. And the problem is we're talking about technology today and the terrible things. Technology is increasing exponentially. We will live within our lifetimes where there will be huge swaths, if not a majority of people who are in relationships with non-humans, with like AIs or with robotics. And that is going to more and more, as it becomes more sophisticated, replace for ideas of convenience. Here's the truth that people don't want to talk about. A relationship's hard. It's hard to be a woman and give yourself to a man. It's hard to be a man and be a provider for a woman. It's hard to develop those relationships. It is convenient to just do hookup culture. It will be convenient to use technology more and more in the future. And we'll see people become more and more isolated. So not only will you see those community interactions, I mean, if you ever get a chance to talk to a teenager in person, it's astounding most of the time. They don't know how to interact with a person face to face. They don't. They don't know. Like, it blows my mind. And I'm 40. I'm almost 40. So I remember I was around when like instant messenger first came out, but I didn't use it. The bulk of my interactions were, hey, we're all going to the bowling alley. The guys and girls are going to be there. We're going to have fun, whatever. I see my sister, it's 20 years younger than me. Like, her friends are like, oh, my friend in Dallas, my friend in California. Like, they rarely have ever met face to face. And those interactions are going to be quite different than what we would think of what a healthy interaction was face to face in the past.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the new public sphere too. And by the way, there's horror on the horizon. Not to blackpill anyone, but the fact that in our lifetime you'll be able to put on a helmet and basically time travel virtually, like not just travel a place. That's first. You want to go to here, you want to go there. It's almost a complete mirror world of this place. It gets so real. You could smell it. You can feel things. Obviously, that's going to be taken over by a demonic force. That's my opinion. But to add on to Rob's position here is that that'll further atomize people and make it not a necessity to even have the family bonds, because now they're saying, that's my family and this is my other family, and the sort of network theory of a family. And while there is a colloquial sense that's true to some extent, it's not the family. It's not the family. You know why? From my view, it's not the extension of the home or the church. It's its own playground. And it's really important to not confuse that, like, the playground itself in a virtual setting, in an immersive setting, is not necessarily reality, even though it's based in, like, it exists in reality, but it's not identical to reality. And I don't know, that kind of frightens me for my own children. An immersive thing that's no longer just a video game. Does that make sense? Because you and I go, oh, look at that game. You play Duck Hunt in virtual. That's really cool, kind of. No, we're talking about, like, full-on immersive worlds where people basically reside. I don't think it'll get that popular where the majority does it, but I think it'll be enough people doing it, and that there are jobs in there, tasks, scavenger hunts, all sorts of gamification going on, that it's going to pull people away a little bit more. And I don't know what how to work against it, right? I think it'll probably catalyze a sort of neo-Luddite, maybe cults or something like this. That's what I kind of predict. We'll see strange neo-Luddite cults that aren't Amish, by the way, more like their own flavor of Christian or something like this, perhaps. Anyway, that's like more of my black pill of like, well, this stuff isn't going anywhere, and we ought to talk about it before it becomes what I think I'm accurately predicting it will be. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. I think this stuff gets layered onto hard reality, and it mixes with hard reality, and we have to, as fathers especially, like, teaching my kids basic distinctions of what's reality and not reality. We take it for granted because we're old boomers, and now we go, I know what reality is. But they're like, is that real? They're like, they have to ask whether the movie is a real person and how it's a real person, and they're not really doing like. And it's amazing as a father how sort of like you're at a loss of words sometimes, right? You know, my daughter asked me what reality is the other day. You know, I was like, listen, let's just go inside.
Yeah.
Well, I was talking to some people might know G. Edward Griffin. We're working on a film right now about an interview that he did. Anyway, so I was talking to him in his home, and one of the questions that we asked him was like, what was life like when it was a very naive question, but we asked him, what was life like in the 50s and 60s compared to how it is today? And the answer that he gave was like, well, obviously life was easier and somewhat better back then, but even then it was all a delusion. Like even then, a lot of what we were enjoying in the way of entertainment and this kind of like American dream thing, like even then, a lot of what's happening now was happening and brewing under the surface back then. So we were living in a kind of fantasy land even then. And to me, I thought that was so true. It's easy to be nostalgic about the past and to romanticize the past, not realizing that like there's nothing new under the sun. One of the things that what you just said, something that you just said made me think, Jimbob, about a friend of mine who's serving as a missionary in Southeast Asia. And they're preaching the gospel. They're taking the Bible and they're translating it into some of these languages that the Bible isn't currently translated into. And they're living amongst the people. They're teaching them entrepreneurship and basically self-dependence. And I asked him, he came to Texas a year or two ago. And I asked him, I said, what's one of the biggest things that you struggle with there in Southeast Asia? What are some of the things that the people struggle with there? And he said, vice, drunkenness and drugs and things of this nature. And he said, the government incentivizes it. The government wants for them to have some kind of escape from reality, because to the extent that the people aren't themselves being productive and they're ever dependent on the government then has a free reign to do whatever the heck it is they want to do. And so when I look at a lot of the ways in which we're moving as far as technology is concerned with virtual reality and all the rest of it, to me, I see it as a kind of escape. And when you look at the world that these folks envision, the likes of Bill Gates and others, like Bill Gates talked about how, a lot of people rightly say that we are automating white collar work and white collar jobs. And yes, we're doing that, but we're not too far off from robotically mimicking blue collar jobs as well. And so imagine an economy where both blue collar and white collar jobs are automated and roboticized. Well, where does that leave the average Joe if he doesn't have any purpose in life? And so what they're doing is they're envisioning and building a world where there is no real need for man to work. And so he just kind of is resorted to vice and games and virtual reality and drugs and things of this nature. And again, I'm not trying to black pill anyone either. I myself am very much a white pill guy because I believe in Christ. Right. But you can't help but see a lot of the things that they're doing, and it makes you wonder.
Yeah. Well, it's going to sell devices entirely. And also, what is this trend toward replacing us with technology, or replacing technology, right? Replacing us with technology. And then I was thinking about this the other day, how the further we go to replacing our function with technology, right? Because technology has been our medium for our purpose. I see that there's a trend of where technology starts advocating the purpose. technology, AI starts prescribing the purpose, and then humans become their medium, like it reverses. That's a black pill. But the thing is, you'd have to sell it through some sort of vice system. Ultimately, why? Because we're ultimately in a spiritual war. So whatever utility we're given or convenience we're given, or like Chad said, whatever technology provides as a vice, as an escape, as some sort of deviance, here, take this, take the apple, right? We're always going to be dealing with, well, that's not fulfilling. That's one thing we know. That's the white pill right there. We know that it's not fulfilling, and it kind of leads to spiritual death. And so there's always I'm glad, Chad, you said there's nothing new under the sun, because whatever the worst category of thing we can think of, as soon as we're aware and we're reminded that it's a spiritual war, there's a remedy, there's an alternative, because you don't fix material problems with material solutions. And so I think that's the reminder. That is the white pill. That's the reminder, is when people get caught into, they think all of reality is just a materialistic, simulation or something, right? That's just not true. So that's a good reminder for people who do get black pilled and accurately describe the daunting future that might be ahead. Just know that the alternative is always available, and it's not made of matter. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, and I think that you and Chad both nailed it. First off, if you're black pill, this is something I deal with a lot. I talk about depressing, like, on-the-ground political stuff. Here's the ultimate white pill, right? You're a Christian. You know the ending, right? Like, there is no black pill. There can never be a black pill if you are Christian. If you are truly a Christian, there is no black pill. Now, let's take it a step further, though. Let's say, but still you worry for this world. Still you worry for what could be. You know where you're going to be and where your family will be spiritually, but then that's fair. You worry for this world. You want to know what the best white pill I've found is? That by truly living your life as a moral way, you exude happiness and you exude an energy that the people that are falling for these vices and other things and are searching for meaning will be drawn to you. When I debate like all of these crazy lefties, you could literally physically see how miserable they are. You could see it. And I hope that it comes across. I am so happy. I love my life so much. So I could get angry and yell at some lefty on a panel, but I absolutely love my life. And I tell people this all the time. When we're out there and we're trying to convince young people that seem to have a politics that usually disagrees with some of the politics we would have, one of the first things I do when I talk to young people is, do you want to be happy? Do you want to have fun? Like, just hang out with us. Just listen. We make jokes. We're not going to go through your yearbook when you were 13 and see if you ever made, some sort of homophobic slur. We don't care. Oh, well, people say things. If I'm offended, I go, hey, that sort of upset me a little. Whatever, moving on. We don't care. Jimbob, that's one of the reasons I was drawn to you. You're having fun. You're laughing at things. It is contagious. And I think that what you see is, one of the things for me that first made me interested in Christianity was I was a big agnostic, and I had this friend who tried to argue with me, and I'll be honest, I was a better arguer than him when it come to religious matters. But what he did that convinced me was living a great life. That's what it was. It was never anything he said. It was me constantly, every interaction I had with him, saying, what a great guy. That's a guy that would give his shirt off his back. That's a guy who goes home and he's happy with his family. And those are the things that convinced me. It wasn't through the power of logical persuasion. It was through the infectiousness of seeing people living moral and great lives. And so to me, you're right. People are going to these vices, going to this technology because it's true. Our society is becoming so... You didn't need this as much when you had to go out and work your finger to the bone on a farm 18 hours a day. Now you have these free times, and idle hands are the devil's work. So what is the meaning that you're searching for? And if you could see people that are like, look how much fun those people are having. Look at how happy they are with their families, right? We're not prude. Like, there's this image that, like, Christian, you just always have to be suit and tied. No, that's not true. We have immense amounts of fun. So to me, that's the white pill. Just keep living our lives.
Yeah, we're not all as composed as Chad.
That's
just so you know, right?
Who's also having fun.
Hey, Rob, did you ever go through a new age phase?
No, never did that. I was an alcoholic, so I certainly went through my vice phase where in college I was super libertarian. I did a smattering of drugs, but alcohol was my drug of choice. For me, it was good people that I met that sort of through their life got me out of that, and most importantly, meeting my wife. And for that, it was like all of a sudden things made sense. And then the ultimate white pill, and everyone should do this, find someone you love and have children. Like for me, that's it. Nothing. Once you do that, everything makes sense. It's like, oh, okay.
What about you two? Did either of you go through like a new age? Hey, I can imagine you with a ponytail. Did it happen?
No, I did study art with an emphasis in graphic design when I was at Azusa Pacific University, which is supposedly a Christian school, and the art department was pretty liberal, even though it was supposedly Christian. But and I got into like weirder music and stuff like that, but never got into any new age stuff.
So I'm the only one here. Question for Chad: is being pro-abortion, being pro-black? Also, how we get progressive LWs out of the black community, left-wingers, I guess. So obviously, the first question, I think we'll all
is being pro-abortion, being pro-black. Well, apparently, according to the running narrative today, there was a Ibram X. Kendi. He went to some event with the guy on CNN, the black guy who has the afro and is the United Shades of America, whatever. He had on a shirt that said, "I will aid and abet abortion." So apparently, being pro-abortion is part of the black struggle. It's part of keeping it real, which is a bunch of nonsense and hogwash. Also, how do we get progressive left-wingers put out of the black community politics?
Yeah, basically moving them over the block. Basically, how do you get that? How do you intervene with where they're at? I think is what they're asking. Getting them out of the lefty paradigm.
Well, it's interesting because, and forgive me if I'm not answering your question, but when you look at the fact that there's all this kind of hoopla about a bunch of blacks realizing that they've been on the Democrat plantation and they're going to pull the lever for Trump in November. I mean, I don't really buy it, for one. When you look at the reason why a lot of these blacks are voting for Trump, and you ask them, well, why? They're saying things like, well, Trump gave us free money, and so it's a matter of coming over to Trump for socialist reasons as opposed to principled conservative reasons. And so for me, when it comes to black culture in America, black culture is a culture of victimhood. It's a culture of believing that you are marginalized and attacked on all sides. That's what black culture is. And so if you believe that you are a marginalized people, conservative ideals will not resonate with you at all. And so it becomes a battle between Republican and Democrat of who can sound the most socialist, because to the extent that you believe that this candidate or that candidate sounds the most socialist, if you believe that you are marginalized, you're going to go for the one who sounds the most socialist. Now, am I saying that Trump is a socialist? I'm not. He did some things that I'm unhappy with. And, whenever he was in office, sure, he passed some bills that, to me, smacked of socialism. But, he's the most conservative president in my lifetime. And so with that being said, of course, I'm going to vote for Trump, but I don't buy this whole notion that blacks are realizing how conservative they are, and that's why they voted for Trump. That's nonsense.
Rob, I have a question about policy, because Chad just said, well, every time, any election season, whatever it is, whatever scale, you go, oh, did you see that thing he voted for? Isn't it the case, correct me if I'm wrong, that when we mention a bill, you'll have a line that someone supports and it makes sense, and then the next line it includes something completely contradictory and nonsensical, and then the work of the journalists and the people like us shouting from the stands, we go, can you believe he voted for that? Well, if it was in the same bill with something else that happened to be more important than that thing, do they just even out? Is that how a bill works? Like, I don't understand. If there's a big, lengthy bill that includes a bunch of contradictory positions, and the politician goes, "Hey, you gotta pick your battles, right?" How do we how is it determined which of those things pass if they cancel each other out? Like, what if most of them canceled each other out? What if that was the case? Well, like, do we even know if that's the case?
So it gets a little complicated, but we'll say this. I feel that the legislative branch, so Congress that writes the laws, are basically the weakest branch now. And although it is true the Founding Fathers wanted 3 co-equal branches, if you had to pick one, they would say they wanted to be slightly stronger, it would be Congress, because it's closer to the people. They're writing the laws. The executive branch, the president's supposed to enforce the law, and then, of course, judicial interpret the law. And what we have is it's been turned on its head. The executive branch is immensely powerful, but not the president. That's not what I mean. The real people that are running the show are the bureaucracies in the executive branch, the FBI, the IRS, the DOJ, the Department of Education. That's who's really running it. So we have these bills that pass, like these funding bill that just passed. It's going to be 1,400 pages that you get 2 days to read. That's going to spend $1.2 trillion. And when you go through it, you have to be a genius to be able to parse out exactly what it's saying. And like you're saying, there'll be on page 7, it'll say something that it's funding something. And then on page 23, it seems to be a direct contradiction. So what side wins out? Whichever side that the executive agencies that are doling out the money and actually enforcing them want. That's what wins out. So you could then see how they're able to use this to talk out of both sides of their mouth. So Biden, for example, that has told us for 4 years, no problem at the border. What are you talking about, crisis at the border? Wasn't a problem in 2020, wasn't a problem in 2021, 2022, 2023. Now 2024, it's a problem and it's Trump's fault. It's the guy last time. It's his fault. And so he's like, well, Republicans didn't vote for this bill that would have funded the border. And it is true. That bill would have gave some sort of funding to the border. But it would have not mattered because that bill also had provisions that said basically there were exemptions allowed by Mayorkas, who's acting under Biden, and Biden himself, that they could basically waive all of the new policy and basically let people in mass if they wanted. And so you're giving people money to people saying, put this money to enforce the border that have refused to enforce the border. And because you refused to give them more powers and more money, they say, that's proof that you didn't want to enforce the border. So the answer to your question is the people that are actually doing the bureaucratic work of enforcing those laws, of putting that money to use, they're the ones that put it into the places that matter. So even if you would have like a bill that would be like, we're going to give $1 million to like pro-Christian, pro-family organizations, blah, blah, blah. I'll guarantee you somewhere in that omnibus bill, there's going to be 10 times more money that is going to secular things that will counteract any of the good that would be done.
Yeah. I don't know, I don't want to leave people in a nihilistic position, but it just seems strange when we celebrate or rant when someone supports one bill or whatever it is, and we're like, if what Rob just said is true, how many of us are following up and seeing, okay, well now we got excited for the thing in its description, but then what really happened and how? Well, I don't know, what would be the average time frame to see if it actually fulfilled? I mean,
when I debate left-wingers, and I'll say, what are the accomplishments of Biden? You want to know what the first thing they always say? Look at the infrastructure bills that he got passed. And I'm like,
I thought you were going to say getting up the stairs or something.
Right. Listening to the Easter Bunny direct him where to go. Yeah, like
right.
They're like, well, what about this infrastructure bill? And I'm like, and what? So he spent a bunch of money. Do you have any proof? Like, did the infrastructure bill do anything yet? Well, no, it just passed. Right. So you're calling it a victory because on paper it says we're going to do a lot of good things. But guess what? That infrastructure bill 4 years ago, you said, oh, that's a victory. It's going to do a bunch of good things. And the bridges are still collapsing. And the roads are still falling apart. So, yeah, that's what happens. People say, oh, look, and it doesn't have to be the president. It could be your politician. They voted for this bill and it does good things. Really, what has it done? It says it's going to do good things, but is it going to do that? And most of the time, by the way, it doesn't even say it's going to do good things, at least not in my estimation as someone who's a conservative or a populist. But yeah, I mean, it's so frustrating because the game then people play, and then we haven't even gotten to discussions of like the pork bills and what have. And so
I'll be right back.
Yeah, no problem.
We'll send you, a new post office in your district that's worth $5 billion if you vote for this monstrosity of a bill. Mm-hmm. And then they'll talk out of both sides of their mouth. Well, the bill does this and this. How could it, if you truly believe, which I don't, but if you do, if you're the person that believes that there's a difference between at the top level, the Republican and Democratic Party, and let's say you're a Republican and you believe that Biden doesn't care about the border, why would he support this border bill if it actually did something to protect the border then? Why would he? You know he wouldn't. You know he wouldn't. He didn't have a change of heart all of a sudden go, you know what, you're right, we need to enforce the border. Of course not. The proof's there. He could use executive orders to enforce the border now. And so it's always amazing to me to listen to people tout this. But did you read this one line in this 1,400 pages? That's a good bill. That's good. My guy's running on that. That's good.
Just from that one thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it tells a possible future, and that's how we all of our voting and all of our actions are based on some faithful future. FB 499 is pro-black to have a rainbow flag in the background. Depends the connotation, of course. Also, I thought that blacks were Christian on average. Maybe that was true. I don't know if that's still true, Chad. I know you do some deep analysis of pre-civil rights, post-civil rights, and all of the lies in between. But when you look at what was a Christian, or a black family, what was a black community pre-civil rights? Most of us who went through or are still going through our Thomas Sowell phase, we know now that, wow, there was quite the contrast of autonomy, thriving businesses, intact family, church going. And so why don't you answer that question maybe in a chronological way, Chad?
Yeah, well, I mean, the fact is, saying blacks on average are Christian is similar to saying South Americans on average are Catholic. It is true, I guess, that traditionally speaking, or culturally speaking, there's some kind of loose attachment to a specific religion, be it Protestantism or Catholicism. But the fact is, they aren't actually living out any true sense of a Christian life. We all know that narrow is the gate, and so, or narrow is the way. And so the fact is, a lot of these blacks who are quote unquote Christian are actually subscribing to liberation theology or the social gospel, which really isn't a gospel at all. They may as well be worshiping the sun. But the fact is, like, these aren't people who are actually following any, the true, doctrine of the gospel at all. Prior to the 1960s, a lot of black churches were, because a lot of the pastors were fundamentalists and they were preaching from the Bible. They weren't infusing any kind of social justice rhetoric.
They didn't have Lion King yet. Yeah,
exactly. They didn't have the Lion King. But yeah, a lot of churches, particularly in the South, black churches were preaching a fundamentalist, like, Christian gospel, and they weren't again infusing it with this kind of social liberation nonsense that you see
in
now.
walks MLK, which is very much, regardless of whether you like how he talked or if it like got you it really is like individualism at its core, isn't it? And it's
right.
like, would you say that's the key element above other influencers? Would you say the timely, the most prominent moment in time as far as a figurehead is MLK, among other people maybe who we don't even know exist, who might be influencing that narrative?
Bagel.
That's absolutely true. I mean, the thing about Martin Luther King, who was a son of the South, so to speak, insofar that he was born in Georgia. His dad was a pastor. He definitely had Southern charm and Southern values coming up. He came from a upper middle class family. He never hungered. And this was true of not only blacks in the South, but whites too. This whole nonsense of, whites were oppressing blacks. It's just nonsense. It just is. I mean, truth be told. But that aside, the fact is, what he was able to do insofar as getting blacks to basically trade in their values for the picket signs and all that other nonsense.
Under assimilation, right? Under this guise of like, assimilate. And you're like, wasn't it interesting that pre-civil rights, blacks had, right, if you were put it on a scorecard, what they are saying they demand they need right now and should be given. They had it.
They had it, right. They had it. So they thought that the white man's ice was colder. And so, so the thing about it is, what Martin Luther King was able to do was what the NAACP failed to do since 1909, because the NAACP was started by some white and Jewish socialists. It wasn't started by black folks. It was started by some white and Jewish socialists. They put W.E.B. Du Bois as the kind of figurehead of this organization. But the problem with the NAACP is that, to the extent that it had black leadership, these were black atheists and intellectuals who spoke a different language than your average Southern Negro. And so it was a disconnect. They weren't able to mesh. What Martin Luther King was able to bring was that kind of NAACP intellectualism under Southern charm.
Right. Perfect mix.
Right. And not only that, but he was able to specifically go after the youth. And this is at a time when this kind of demoralization thing was happening, not only as far as black activism is concerned, but in America at large, with the emergence of rock and roll and just utilizing the youth as a rebellion against the adult society. And so all this was kind of happening at the same time. A lot of the black older folks in the South were against the civil rights movement, as Hake eloquently pointed out earlier, but a lot of the black youth were kind of moved with the current of it, and they wanted to feel like they were part of something. So the businesses that their black mothers and fathers started and were already successful, to the point that you just made, Jimbob, they didn't want to be any part. They didn't want to take part in that, because that requires work. That requires me having to get out of bed. What Martin Luther King is proposing is, you know, the white man's ice is colder. We get to sit at his table. We get to go to his school. We get to go to his doctor's office. We get to eat their sandwiches at their shops, and everything will be all hunky dory, only to get what we have now. Which,
and you guys had better barbecue the whole time.
So exactly.
Well, would you say that, you know, the infiltration, some say, you know, I think there's enough evidence to assume CIA and some other agencies maybe helped construct the invasion of liberation, sexual liberation, these kind of movements, acid and drug-based stuff. It seems that blacks at the time that wasn't as targeted to them, was it? Like, because it just, like, what was happening there? You know, you get, like, who can you point to? There's a couple hippies there. There's people, you know, a couple Afroed people at Woodstock, etc. But generally, when we think of, like, culture, isn't it interesting? You think back in all the footage, you don't really see, like, the hippie black people, right? Like, as like this consolidated subgroup, right? So it seems to be that first general culture and tradition was attacked with drugs and, you know, Grateful Dead and all this, you know, hippie stuff, and all the white nerds came out and, like, get out of here, you know, get your long hair out of here. Well, it seems like a different subculture came a little bit after. It's just interesting that that black culture, at least, I don't know if I'm wrong about this, just wasn't as affected as white culture, if we're going to break it up into two colors, as from that initial subversive act of, like, freedom, British, you know, Beatlemania, the whole thing, right? It's just interesting that a lot of that preceded.
Well, you've long had a black degeneracy going on, especially in the North and in the West
jazz.
Coast.
Talking about jazz, aren't you?
Well, yeah, you had a lot of black degeneracy, but the reason why you didn't see a lot of it in the South is, once again, because, to the commenter's point, a lot of them were churchgoers, and there were values that were upheld in the church. If you were a black female teenager and you got pregnant, it was a mark of shame on the family, and they would pull you out of school, and you would have the baby in private, and the baby would be raised by the grandmother, who would be the parent, and then the mother would be the sister. Like, this was common in the so-called black community, because, like, they had a degree of shame. Shame is a good thing. But once the 60s and 70s came along, and you see this demoralization of culture, that which is at the bottom of the barrel, the lowest common denominator, becomes the coolest. So we made pimping cool, hustling cool, drug dealing, and all the things.
And that followed now, right, to what considered black culture.
Black
right?
culture, right.
This is absurd, right? It's a follow-through.
Right. And so, you know, to answer the commenter's question, is like, is it considered pro-black to have a rainbow flag? Yes, it is, because blackness is degeneracy. To be pro-black, is to be pro-degeneracy. So of course you're going to support LGBT and all of the degeneracy, because that's what blackness is. So
That's a really genius subversive tactic. Is you socially engineer an entire culture, and then you assign a race to that specific behavior, but then you rebrand that as its culture, right? So like you get someone from the West Indies, and you ask them, what do you think about black culture? And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? Like, obviously that's not my culture, but it really is interesting. It just shows that you can craft and engineer, and you could be successful in branding a certain set of behaviors, a culture, right? A way of acting, a way of talking, and just name it, right? You just declare it. So, well, that's the culture. And then if you go against that, you go, oh, you hate black people. And you go, what? You know, I'll use my token black. Is Chad Jackson my token black? He's wearing clothing. Like, look, like I couldn't look that impeccable. This is
well,
not.
the thing is,
why isn't this black culture? Guess what? There was pictures, right? You see those pictures, Chad, of the 20s. These men were impeccably dressed, right? Walking the streets, dipping their hats, you know, shoulders out, back straight. This was the culture. Now, these people would say, well, no, they were just impersonating the European culture. That was wrong of them. And you're like, yeah, right. Now where are you? You have a degenerate culture that you defend as if it's your identity. This is crazy. Now it's not absent in quote white culture, of course. We have our own versions of these things, right? But what a trick! What a little demonic trick that was.
I just wanted to add too, like, and this is part of one of the many critiques I have of modern Black conservatism, is that a lot of these folks really are grifting, but that's not even the issue. The issue is that a lot of them are trying to straddle the fence and have it both ways. They're trying to preach and teach conservative values, but at the same time, they're trying to still hang on to their so-called Black card. And trying to like be hip and in and with the culture.
Yeah, like Oprah changes her voice. Yeah, she's all like, and then I went on a meditation retreat, and then the black guest and she's like, yo, and you're like, what? Like, what is this?
Well, I had a couple questions, Chat, just real quick.
Sure.
And I could ask these because, like Hillary,
Hake hasn't talked in a while too.
Well,
so.
Hake.
Does he have hot sauce in his purse like I do?
Yeah. Did he earn it?
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. Before you jump in, then Rob, the blacks were already doing the out of wedlock births at a rate that was considered a crisis, according to I think LBJ's guy, that J. Patrick Moynihan report. By 65, like it was a crisis at 25% or whatever, and now whites are at 29%, and the blacks are like 73%. But it's it had already been going on, even if they didn't go along with they didn't turn into outward hippies right away.
Right, Rob. What question? Were you going to ask?
Sort of a comment, Chad. I wanted to get what you think on this. Obviously, I cannot relate to the unique problems that are occurring in the Black community. One of the things as an outsider I could see that I can relate to, though, is when I was sort of this hillbilly that got into the debate community in college, I was looked at as an anomaly. It was like I was harmless. Oh, this libertarian-esque conservative dude. Haha, it's okay. And at one point, at that point, I had long hair and a big beard, and I had these people tell me one time, well, you're really good at this. If you just clean up and sort of kind of adapt our positions more, you could be just like us. And I was like, what? No, thank you. And what I came to realize was I could handle people disliking me or hating me, but what to me was the worst possible thing was someone pitying me. And that's what I've always wondered. Like, you put it so well when you talk about socialism being an ideal. Who could be more socialist to the Black community because they've embraced this sort of idea of being a victim? To me, as a strong person that would be in the Black community, nothing would upset me more. How dare you think I need your charity? How dare you? Even if you dislike white people, wouldn't your emotion be, I will show you I do not need you. I could go out on my own. I don't need your handout. And so it always struck me as odd. People I knew that were Black that were immensely intelligent and strong people, but they still fell for this grift. They would still fall for this victimhood narrative, and I could never understand it. I don't know if you have some insight. Why buy into people that claim to pity you? Aren't those people the people you should dislike the most?
Well, I mean, your observation is actually spot on. But let me just say that the way that you started off your comment is an error that a lot of white people unfortunately make. Namely that, well, I can't imagine, like, I couldn't put myself in a black man's shoes. And it kind of assumes that there's something like different about being black in this country than there is about being white. I can tell you that I've been a black man for 34 years, or I've been black for 34 years. And I can honestly tell you that there's nothing unique or different about having dark colored skin. I like everything that
Except
I've
for
attempted in
singing.
life,
Except for singing.
everything that I've attempted in life, I've succeeded at. Obviously, not the first time. And to the extent that I failed, it was because of something that I like, some deficiency on my part, not because of the color of my skin. And so there's nothing like those who say like it's hard out here being black, like they're lying to you. Like they're a liar. They're a liar and the truth is not in them. The fact is, to the extent that black folks make it out to make it out to be this kind of immense struggle for having dark colored skin, it's ingrained in black people from a very early age. Like the whole struggle is a part of your upbringing. I remember as a kid when we used to watch movies like Roots and Rosewood and all these different things, and what that does is that imprints in your psyche a kind of story of what our struggle is compared to white folks.
Yeah.
And when I personally as an adult looked into Rosewood and looked into Roots and all this stuff and found out that a lot of it was just a lie, it makes you wonder, why is it? And then you start doing more research and you read the writings of people like Vladimir Lenin, who said that we must class the Negro in America as a marginalized people, as a marginalized nation. And then you understand, like, oh, okay, to the extent that we collectivize ourselves as a group called the Blacks or whatever you want to call us, and we say that the first word that should come to mind when you think of our group is marginalized, it then becomes a thing of who can pander to this marginalized group the most. And so
an economy, it's like an economy that starts, a currency.
Right. And so it's all politicization. It's really what it is. Like blackness is a construct that's rooted in politicization. But it's not real.
But Chad, I got to say, the whole paradigm, even though I reject it, when it started sort of cultivating to a palpable level of black people, marginalized white people level step up, it gave me a lot of confidence. You know, I started I started being like, yeah, maybe I am a level up. And then it ironically had.
See, Chad's a little young. You probably don't remember the old Eddie Murphy SNL where he dresses up like a white guy and he goes into the store and he tries to pay for his
but that's humor.
Yeah, and he's like, you don't have to pay for that, you're white. That's how I thought life was. You know, first time I got locked up for shoplifting, I'm like, but I'm white. What are you doing? I don't pay for stuff, right? You know?
Yeah. Don't you know? That would have the opposite. I actually met I knew a couple, right? And they adopted. They were in LA, and I made my move away from a liberal position to more centrist to then ultimately pretty far right. And this couple was posting, they adopted a black baby, and they went to a course that taught them how to teach their kid that they are marginalized, even though they're at an advantage at the same time. Is so confusing. So they taught their kid a program with their kids. They went into a program where they'd have to teach their kid how to know that their skin color is marginalized, but they're at an advantage because they're in a white family. Like this, can you imagine teaching a kid that? Like, I'm so glad my kids are still in an age where they're like, that guy has black skin. And I'm like, yep. And it's like they're descriptively just saying what the world is, but they're not ever going, well, they can't do it, or I can do it, or this or that. And like, there's nothing descriptively that they're in their experience is notably different other than just straight up pointing and being like, they have different hair, they have different face. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. There's nothing more to say at that point. But this is how nefarious and disgusting it is, and how embedded it is into basic public schools, but just in the culture that you just accept it. Critical race theory, right? The whole concept that you are your status is already predetermined. It's almost like Westworld, that mirror world where it's like,
right.
What was that scene? It was like, so you're mirroring the world, so you dictate what I can't do, and they say no, we dictate your entire storyline, basically, everything. And it's kind of like that. It's just a soft approach, but it's amazing how I think Chad's point, it's very appealing. It's a very appealing to go, I went through that, right? There's just sort of this like, I'm triumphant. It's like the Beyonce did it on your own kind of like thing. Like it's almost like there's an anthem that comes with it in the background of your psyche where you're like, I made it through in America as a black person. And you're like, yeah, but I just talked to someone who's like the diametrically opposed, the opposite of you, Chad. And he was like, don't talk to me about the struggle. And I'm like, he's got a fancy microphone. He's got a YouTube channel. He's getting paid. And I'm like, compared to other people of varying different colors and ethnicities, you are in the luxury status. You're in the top 1% of the world as so far as decadence is concerned. And that's why it's the giant lie, isn't it? But it's happened with women, you're oppressed. And then you go, who else wants to take the oppression card? But the good news, and I want to get all your takes on this, don't you think the card is fading? The print on the victim card is fading? It's not working at the cash register anymore?
I'll say this, that like one of the most important things about us are the stories that we tell ourselves, because that determines the direction that we move and how we see other people and how we move and navigate through the world. Social scientists understand this, and it's the very reason why they invest so heavily in propaganda. And because you want to shape the stories that people tell themselves. And this is why a lot of 16 and 17-year-old blacks believe that, there's history in my skin and I'm part of the struggle and they're part of something. When in reality, like, you've never experienced anything in life that, that is traumatizing or anything like that. And so, one of the most important things is the stories that we tell ourselves. And my children, they will never relate to somebody who grows up in a pro-black household. They just won't, because it's like the stories that they're hearing and the are that of victors and people who can do whatever they want, put their mind to, and this, that, and the third. And so that's not a specifically black thing. That's just a human thing. But is the victim card fading? Yes and no. It's the thing about it is, so long as public education is centralized in our country, and CRT, even though it might not be identified as that because it morphs into other things and into other acronyms, so long as that exists, you'll forever have this kind of built-in sympathy for people who are marginalized or quote unquote intersectional. So long as you have the centralization of public education, you'll always have that kind of built-in audience at the ready that's teaching white people to feel guilty, blacks, lesbians, gays, whatever, to feel as though
Prideful.
there's credit, there's social credit in their intersectionality. So that on the one hand, and then two, on the other hand, a lot of black folks teaching in their own localized households that they are victims. This is part of your story. And you ain't going to be nothing. You're never going to be nothing. This, that, and the third. Like, so long as you have those two things that exist and are perpetuated, I don't think the victim card is
also,
really
what's interesting, Chad, is that even on the other side, if you're successful, there's this added bonus currency where you go, and I did it as a black guy. And you're like, there's this added like trophy shininess to it. And it actually kind of perverts and takes away from the work, because you want to know that your accomplishments are faithful, are good, are ethical, but also, all glory to God and your work that he gave you the skill to do it, that it's of a gift. And this is fundamentally where materialism kind of comes in, is that the intersectional thing, right, is really kind of derived from a Darwinian evolutionary kind of lens. It's not so precise, but it's general. And it really is materialism, because it assumes that there are all these key features of our biology that are fixed. It's almost like they expect Chad to teach his kids that there's metaphoric whiplashings on the DNA strands of his children, right? So it's like, and this is that's why I ask, like, a lot of it is almost like it's almost borderline new age or sort of woo woo if you really put it in a different context. Like, what if you took the whole intersectionality and instead of putting it through the lens of sort of like the left wing, blue haired, self righteous SJW, you put it in the lens of like a commune that's all like hippy dippy. It would you could make it sound kind of similar in it has this weird mystical, superstitious approach where it's like your skin carries with you this history and a story, and it's in you, and you're still traumatized from the past you're remembering that wasn't you, by the way. It's almost like reincarnation. It's getting to that level, which to me is a good news, because the more absurd it gets, the more desperate they needed to keep it around, the more desperate they use narratives to keep it around, and they get more ridiculous, right? That's why headlines, me as a satirical cartoonist, people, outfits like the Babylon Bee, we don't have to work as hard to write a headline, because satire is reality, and we just report what is, and that's kind of sad for satire. But that's why I'm not too worried and outraged by any of it. It's getting to such a silly point where you just kind of watch it, right? You just go, oh, well, that's gonna probably die out.
That's exactly the point I was going to make. Like, to the extent, like, you're absolutely right, Chad. In some ways, the victim card's dying. In some ways, it's not. But here's the truth. If we really want to get right down to it, our side, whatever that is, has failed in the public messaging. The successes we see in the diminishment of the victim card is only the hubris of the people that play it. And the more absurdity they get. I'm all for it. You're right. Women are special, and men could be women, and they should compete in this way. Yep, have at her. Yeah, and like you see this, you could see the cognitive dissonance in people's faces in real time. It's like, now we just have random homeless people beating women in the street, and they're all like looking at each other like. And it's funny, I just saw a post earlier before I came on about an interview where some guy from the third world, some politician, he's just spitting facts because they don't care. They don't have all this PC. So they could just be like, crime, yeah, it's garbage. We're going to do whatever. We have to sit there. Our society sits there and they're like, oh, I don't see a problem with that guy with the 5 o'clock shadow that's 250 pounds, competing in T-ball against those 9-year-old guys. What problem are you talking about? No. And you're just like, okie dokie, let's keep playing it out. And then eventually, it'll get to the point where even they have to be like, yeah, okay, this is stupid. And once that first domino falls, you realize the whole game's done. Intersectionality, for example. I'm not the first to have said this, but the obvious end game of this is if you say, well, I'm oppressed because I'm black, and the next person says, I'm oppressed more because I'm oppressed as a black person and as a woman. That's intersectional.
Amputee. And an amputee.
Right. And then it goes down the list. And you know who the most oppressed is at the end? It's the individual. At the end of it, you get to, there's never been a person exactly like you. But here's the funny part. Here's what's even better. That in itself, you might say, then that's an individualistic message. No, it's quite the opposite, because it proves that no one's special, right? Which you knew if you were Christian in the first place. You knew that you couldn't, through your own free will or your own excellence, achieve something not through Christ, right? So the entire game of like, this group's more marginalized, this group's more marginalized. What happens is, as you make it more and more finite, the people that were playing that game, I'll give you an example. Like, for example, people that are Jewish. A lot of people that were Jewish were happy to play the cultural Marxist game, right? And they would say, yes, we are oppressed peoples, right? And then other people on the left were like, you're right, cultural Marxism's right, we need to play the victim card. And oh, by the way, Jews, you're oppressors. And the Jewish people were like, wait, no, we agree.
But we already won this game. We already won this game.
We agree the victimhood game's a good game to play. We're just saying we're the victims. And the other side's like, no, we agree with the game. And that's how it'll collapse eventually. Once every group claims victimhood, and then they all realize like, oh, maybe this is a losing game.
I think, I don't know if I believe it or not, but some of the headlines at least are saying, well, the companies and the people who are actually competing in their skills and in their labor in their companies, they're going, this isn't really working, the whole like diversity, equity, inclusion. It's producing mediocre outcomes, right? That's not to say that cronyism or nepotism wouldn't permit hiring someone you liked really well, much better than someone else who just was a 75% success versus the 85% of the person you didn't like. That makes sense to me, to discriminate and go, well, I'm looking at long term. I want to be able to get along with someone, maybe share some values. I would take a 75%er effectiveness in their job over a 90%er if I didn't like the 90%er as a person and I didn't maybe trust them or something like this. But ultimately, this whole DEI thing is reaching its satirical end as well. And I agree with Rob, where you just kind of you just watch it happen, and what is the famous quote from the guy who probably didn't exist? Don't interfere when the enemy destroying itself. That guy was right to some extent. Now you still have to refute. You still have to argue against. You still have to call out sin and degeneracy. But there is a sort of a utility to just watching the dominoes fall, because it's a snake eating itself. It's ultimately cannibalistic. It's trend based. It has no ultimate foundation for truth or goodness. So in a way, they just die out. But the problem is they take our children. That's why the whole public school system, or even just assimilating them to some existence in our society, they're already exposed to sort of this individualism, pridefulness, be whoever you truly want to be kind of thing. And they're going to get that regardless if they go to public school or not. And so that seems to be the battle here is, okay, it'll die, but it won't die if they constantly get an influx of new participants. And those are our children. Guess who's having the children? Christians. The secularists don't need children. They use ours. So we got to starve them of the thing they want. And they're like vampires. They need the children. They're just waiting. Oh, look at that new Christian baby. Can't wait to get that. Get him swaddled in a rainbow flag. You gotta defend it. But it's hard because it's everywhere in culture. It's not like, well, I'm good because I don't take my kid to public school. I'm based. I have a homeschool. Yeah, that's going to help. But the problem is, as soon as they have a friend, as soon as they go out in the world, like we're never immune. We have to be in the world. We have to be in the world. Yeah, we're not of the world, but we have to be in the world. And that's our challenge. It's not an easy game, even if Rob's right that, well, we can watch most of it just fall away. We can watch most of it just come to its self-refuting, just a nonsensical end, which is fun to watch.
That's why Rob is right that we have to be watching ourselves and be perfect, be light in our homes, so that those of us who are fathers or mothers or whatever are not overreacting to the evil and angry at the evil people, at the people who are possessed by evil, and turning off our kids so that they can get seduced by the world so easily. If you're a good example to your children, then they won't be so easily seduced by the world. Or they may wander a bit, but they'll come back to reality quicker rather than being conservative kids who just turn liberals and off the deep end.
Now I have a question for you guys as fathers or future fathers is, when our kids get old enough where they have like friends, and let's say they have a friend whose household is not Christian, what are the safeguards, and what do you think the protocol is for determining whether or not even simple things like having their first sleepover? Like, to me, I mean, I'm a conspiratard, right? I made the mistake of watching the Nickelodeon documentary that's out on HBO. So I really don't trust most people generally, and I don't even think it's a good idea to say, "Oh yeah, go off to their house; it'll be fine." I'm always the concerned one, going, "I don't know. I don't want to send my kid anywhere." But I'm trying to gather like how to navigate that, right? Because to me, I don't care. I'll just go. If I had it my way, my family would just always stay at home. We wouldn't even go anywhere for vacation. We would hardly visit family. But in that sense, you don't rob kids of the social aspect of interaction. So what do? Right? We can't just cover them in some shield, right? Our own firmament, human firmament. Oh, you're guided forever. But then, what's your threshold? How do you determine? Okay, this is. They're going to have to go out there and deal with it, and I'll talk to them about it if something comes up. Like, what's your guys' take on this?
That's an interesting question. Go ahead.
It's one of the hardest things. Like, it comes to this, this question in a fundamental scale of freedom versus security. You can't over-coddle your child, right? And now, obviously, you'd say, of course, I understand that. You have to leave him climb the big slide at the playground. If, he may get hurt, but you have to leave it at. But it applies like that with social relationships as well, because what you don't want to do is shield your child so much that they have contempt for you, because that will raise, once they do get amount of freedom as they get older, then they will seek to rebel. So you have to be someone who is presenting a healthy lifestyle. There you go. Yeah. Or that works too. You don't want to be overbearing, I guess is what I'm saying. So, I mean, there's no right answer. I would have no problem with my kid hanging out with a family that wasn't Christian if I truly believed that the behaviors that were occurring in that home were ones that I thought weren't trying to indoctrinate my kid or were so over the line that it would be something that I would refuse to accept. The problem is, how do you know that? Right? How many people do you really know? Do you really know your neighbor? Right? Do you trust to let your kids date your neighbors? I don't know. It's hard. My kid's only 3. It's something I'll have to deal with. I could say right now, the only place my child has spent the night overnight is in-laws that I immensely trust and my parents. So it's like, it's all been good.
Yeah.
I have complete faith. But yeah,
Chad,
I wouldn't trust at this point anywhere else.
Chad, why do I get the sense that your kids don't even know what Disney World is?
They don't. It's actually true. No, and for me, like, I think that we have, I mean, there's no reason to live in 2024 and to not by this time know better, because we have the youth generation of the 60s, otherwise known as the baby boomers, and how their parents raised them. Again, a lot of them, for the most part, especially in the South, had decent morals that they instilled in their kids, juxtaposed to an outside kind of world that was pushing second wave feminism, civil rights, rock and roll, degeneracy, sex, drugs, rock and roll, things of this nature. So to the extent that the culture was really calling the kids, I feel like that generation of parenting kind of lost the young baby boomers at the time. And then you look at Generation X, which raised millennial generation, if I got that correct, in the 90s, the everybody gets a trophy kind of generation. These are people who embraced the culture. They weren't trying to fight against it. They sought to become one and the same with the culture, where it became very much this, I'm not a parent as much as I am my child's friend.
A friend, yeah, that whole thing. Right.
Right. And so you see those two kind of polar opposites. And like, for me, I have to look at those as case studies and see which generation of adults and parents conceived the most well-equipped and well-rounded adults. And the fact is, I would have to say that older generation in the 60s and 70s or 50s and 60s did, with all of its warts and bruises. I tend to take a place of, what the Bible says, which is to act and move with discernment. You have to have discernment as a parent. You don't embrace the culture. You talk about and inform your children of what the culture is and the fact that, Satan is the kind of king of the air. But you really instill in your children godly values. The Bible says, train up a child in the way that they should go. And so it's incumbent upon us as parents to really pour that into them, and make them aware of what the world is, make them aware of the fact that the world is dark and dying, make them aware of the fact that Satan does prowl like a lion seeking whom he will destroy. You have to equip them of that. So I make my children aware of the fact that, yes, here's what Disney is teaching you. Here's what this is teaching you. Here's what that's teaching you. And here's how it differs from the word of God. And I can honestly say that my children have come back to me after hanging out with their cousins or some, random little snotty-nosed kid down the street and say, oh, this is what their family believed. And this is what so-and-so said. And I had to tell them, well, no, this is us. So again, like some of my, I have 4 kids. They all have different personal, personalities. But I can even say that even the more kind of like non-alpha of my kids are still sure-footed in what their values are, and I'm hoping to foster that. Obviously, they're going to grow up and they're going to have to deal with the world on their own. They might become prodigal or go, into new ageism or whatever the case may be. But it's incumbent upon me as a parent to really instill that solid foundation, and I have to be faithful regardless of where the chips fall.
Right. I don't know if Hake, you have anything on that, but I want to start wrapping it up. If there's anyone in the chat, if I missed a chat, let me know. If you want any questions before we close out, send them in now, either the YouTube super chat or the Bob chat. Thank you so much to the Bob chats who came in just now. Our Varus and Daniel, appreciate you. Any closing statements? Any last things before we close up and you guys can get back to your lives? Anything?
Yeah, I thought this was a lot of fun. It's always, for me, it is exceedingly rare when I get on with a panel of a bunch of people that I could respect their opinions and think they're decent human beings. Most of the time, it's like me versus five. You know, just to give you a clue, yesterday, I was talking to a person that was vehemently arguing against the fact that schools are sexualizing children, who then proceeded to tell me that when he was 9 years old and in 4th grade, his teacher taught him about masturbation and how that was a good thing. And so, like, it's so weird. You try to go out in these spaces and give people the benefit of the doubt. Okay, I know you're not someone that I would normally like, but I could find some kernel of goodness in you that makes this conversation worthwhile. And then you hear something like that, and you're just like, ah. So this has been wonderful. I've had a great time. As opposed to that,
I'm glad you jumped on. Appreciate it, and you're welcome back again, especially if the topics are suitable. And I hope you get back on to Timcast and even bigger audiences. I hope that lands you a bunch of spots. Chad, any last words?
Well, this is fun as always. Always good to see my brother Hake. Nice to meet you, Rob. And much respect to you, Jimbob. Had a lot of fun. Hope to come back.
Hey, no problem. And Hake, final thoughts?
You know, Cernovich posted on X that he doesn't even let his kids do sleepovers now. And that was kind of a shocking statement to me because I slept over at my different friend's house and cousin's house and all that stuff. And that was like some of the funnest stuff. But it speaks to you can't really trust people. And so it's an interesting thing to consider because times have changed a lot. It's nice to hear history, real, true history of how things once were, because it kind of opens your mind and hear people who actually lived at JLP, stuff that Chad has looked into, and what Rob just said about that friend of his or that person we talked to with the 9-year-old taught about the big M, the M word. And it reminded me of Bill Clinton's black female Surgeon General promoted that, I think, in the 90s when I was a kid.
Sure did. Yeah. And
like my friends were talking about it. I'm like, what? But there's a whole lot of sick stuff in the world. But the other white pill that you guys didn't really mention, at least not explicitly, was that you can't really stamp out the truth. The truth is always going to be, people inherently know it. I knew I heard of a kid who was raised by lesbians, made by a gay who worked with lesbian in San Francisco, and all of the class were like, "Oh, that's so wonderful! Your parents are two mothers," and he knew even as a little kid, with nobody telling him, that there was something wrong with that. So people have a spiritual understanding, at least the few. So there's nothing to get black-hearted about.
Yep. No, absolutely. Just to be aware, a little bit more aware now than we were before. Because to me, it was like sleepover. My parents were like, okay, fine. I don't care. Get out of my hair. My parents raised 4 sons and a daughter. I mean, to them, it was like, I don't care. Like, something might happen to you, but geez, let's just go. But for us, it was like the beginning of cooler video games, just post Atari, NBA Jam, early Nintendo, all this stuff. It was like, okay, it's not YouTube. It's not, pornography was rampant, but we didn't know it. Like you'd have to work harder to find that and stuff. And now it's just a different game. And so, we can't apply what we remember being a child was for us and apply the kind of restrictions or safety standards or whatever, concern standards. We can't derive them from our past. So this is what's interesting, is that we're navigating as the new fathers of this time, and we're ultimately don't have a full pulse, a finger on the pulse in what the world is actually. You remember how much we can hide from our parents? Remember? Yeah. Like how much they didn't know.
Yep. I was going to say to Rob, he doesn't know his neighbors. You may not. we'll find out we don't even know our wives,
Yep.
friends, brothers,
It's true.
things that go on in people's hearts.
Oh, someone said it's sad because Meg and my wife said we don't do sleepovers, and someone said it's sad you don't do sleepovers. Well, she's only 7, and again, it's like you have to really know the person. Like, for instance, I trust my parents, the grandparents, like to watch my kid, but I don't have faith that they're going to keep them alive. Like I just like there's a certain like they're almost more aloof. Like then I don't know if you guys get this, where the grandparents, you're just like,
Spoil them.
what are you doing? Yeah, you spoil them. They come home bratty because they got everything. They didn't sleep well, but also the parents are oblivious. Like the grandparents are sort of oblivious, and so I don't even trust my own parents or other people who I actually trust ethically as people. I don't trust them practically even. So it's not like, for me and Megan, we're pretty guarded as far as certain things, but we'll let our kids run outside because our neighborhood is filled with kids as long as they're just running outside. Like, to me, that's like, okay, great. Run outside, run around, play games. But ultimately, like leaving them in a house today, especially, it probably was a mistake watching the Nickelodeon thing, honestly. It's because now it's just like...
What happened with the Nickelodeon thing?
Well, there's finally, and all the truthers actually were covering this years ago, right? People like Brian Peck, who we assumed something was going on with that guy. And it turns out all of these writers, executive producers, people within Nickelodeon and Disney were in fact doing horrific things.
Yes.
Right. And finally the dude came out, who it was all redacted until now, where he came out and he's basically pointed out the person who ended up going to jail for 16 months for literally graping a 15-year-old boy. And he got hired by Disney right after, just not noble, like just like that. And so you just gotta go, wow. Well, now that's a really dark world. So any of the parents, I don't know if anyone saw it in the chat or anyone on here saw it, but the parents were acting like, and they're partially responsible. They fed their child. They looked away to whatever extent they felt comfortable looking away because that cash, that Disney cash, that Nickelodeon cash was just coming in. And you didn't want to take away their dream. And but they're all acting like, I don't know, I just didn't. And I was like, no, this is bad parenting. Like, ultimately, you point at the victim, or not the victim, you point at the perpetrator, right? Obviously, a child victim, but the parents, they're not victimless. I mean, they're not guilt free, but they kind of posed it as if they were in the show. I also wonder this. Sorry to keep you guys on, but
no, you're fine.
I actually wonder. If this is my conspiratard hat going on, I wonder if this kind of thing, like HBO doing this, creates a fall man view where things got handled, where you don't have to ask about, I don't know, Steven Spielberg or, other people who might be higher up who know this stuff happens at a larger level. But now they've done it. You guys, don't worry. We came in and nipped the bud. We pointed out the bad guy. He went to jail. Things got sorted, and now we're focused, right? We're back on track. I almost feel like it's like a work like that, where you demonstrate some justice happen and some magnifying glass is on the problem, but it's on such a small aspect of the map, and then the populace goes, well, yeah, no, I heard about it. That's terrible. Mm-hmm. And then they never move forward. Do you think that's the thing, or am I looking into it too much? Do you think that's a method there?
I absolutely
totally agree.
Dan Schneider, the guy that was like the head producer, he did an interview afterwards. Did you see his interview where he's like, oh, yeah, if there was any sexual material that was on the episodes, go ahead and take those episodes off the air. Well, thank you very much. You've scarred children for their life. But that's cool now that it's been on the air for 10 years. And you're right, they're trying to whitewash it. The one thing I'll say, if you haven't watched it, or even Jimbob, if you had, this is the key point I took away from it. It was in your face. The jokes that they had these kids engaging with on the show were like foot fetish stuff and
so gross,
gross stuff that you
Grande,
to me, the lesson learned is this. When they tell us, oh, you saw that video, that TikTok of that teacher with the pride flag and saying this, it's not a big deal. There's nothing. No, the lesson is we should have spoke up when that stuff was happening in 2010, 2012 in Nickelodeon, and we should be speaking up now, because someday we'll find when the scab gets ripped on the stuff we're seeing now that looks so bad, that there was evil stuff even worse going on behind the scenes. So that's the lesson I took from it.
Yeah, I think so. Cool. Well, thank you so much, chat. Thank you, participants. It's always great to have you guys on. You'll be on again. If you know other people who might be a good candidate or pick for the mixed bag panel, let me know. Let them know. Let them know it's a good show. It's easygoing. It's fun. I'd love to get more people on and share the word for mixed bag panel. With that, I'm going to take you guys down, play the outro. Appreciate you all. God bless you all in the chat. God bless you guys, panelists, and I'll see you guys next time. All righty. I'm actually going to leave you guys with a treat. It's a new age commercial I made.
All right. Oh, this guy always pops up. That guy. All right, let's do this. It was fun. So, if I had my brother, I think Jimbob's a really funny guy. I would have liked it to have been more funny. I'm not someone who necessarily wears my Christianity on my sleeve. There's some things that were said there that I don't agree with. Like, I don't agree with the idea that women shouldn't be able to vote or that only landowners. But what I'm trying to do, particularly on panels like that, is build coalitions and build bridges to where I think culture and politics needs to go. So I don't think that it's incumbent on me to fight tooth and nail any single disagreement that I would have, unless it's on like the specific issues that I focus on. But ultimately, I thought they're all three great people. I've known Jimbob. Hake seemed very cool. So did Chad. Again, I know some of the people listening might say like, I don't know that I necessarily agree with that sort of stuff, everything that was being said, and that's perfectly fine. But I think that I enjoy talking to people, even from, like, I enjoy the Christian nationalists talking to them, even if I disagree with a lot of their political recommendations, because I think that culturally and sort of when it comes to the values that I think are important, I think that they share those values. And so we might have a disagreement on how we get there, or what does getting there look like, or how should the government have a role in that. We might have disagreement in those sorts of things. We're pushing in the similar direction. Thanks. Okay, I'm glad you've enjoyed the content in the past couple days. Now, it's a bummer that this panel comes off me talking to Destiny in a non-contentious way as well, where we were sort of just talking about my job. My preference is to argue with people, particularly lefties. So I did tell Destiny I would love to come on and yell at him about vaccines at some point. So hopefully we get our chance to do that in the near future. But now I think you all should check out Jimbob's channel specifically. Hake and Chad, I'm not sure if they have channels, but I'm sure if you go to Jimbob's video, he'll have an actual link to any of the ways to contact them or to see any of their contact. But Jimbob, I think, so. Like, even if you're not in deeply to more of sort of the Christian content, I think Jimbob's a really funny guy. And I love that. I love when there are people whose message I could agree with, who happens to be really funny and entertaining as well. So I hope that you'll check Jimbob out. I think I was honored to do the show. One of the things I always try to do with very, very few exceptions is I try to remember when someone's done something good for me and try to return the favor. And Jimbob, when he didn't know me from Adam, agreed to come on to that 24/7 show. And I thought that he was one of my favorite guests that I had on there. I think his comics that he does, his cartoons are hilarious. And so anytime Jimbob needs me to be on a panel or to help him in any way, I absolutely would jump at the chance. I think he's a great guy. And I couldn't be happier to see the success he's having, and I hope he continues to grow in that success. I also have some people that I think will be great fits for that show. My friend Let's Be Frank, that has a channel that focuses on a lot of Bible readings. I think he would be fantastic for that show. And my friend Sarah Kane. Sarah Kane goes by the Crusader Gal. I really cannot recommend her enough. I think she is one of the most intelligent political commentators that I see. We don't agree on everything. She definitely has more of a focus on Christianity and sort of the spiritual nature of what's going on in the world today than me. But I think she's absolutely brilliant. I think, where's Jimbob's appearance on that stream? Let me see if I can find that. It's tough because so much stuff has to be privated and blah, blah, blah for YouTube because, let me see. No. I don't want to switch account. I'm going to go to my videos. Let's see. Oh, for crying out loud. Why can I not find that video? Your videos. There we go. What an idiot. Videos. Now, I actually put thumbnails together and all that good stuff for the 24-hour stream. There we go. Jimbob on using satire to challenge authority. What a great title. Wow. I really nailed that.
Thank you so much for coming on.
And if I can't remember what time of day this was, but I'll put the link in here. Yeah, I thought about pushing back on the women shouldn't vote. I want to do a debate with Andrew or someone on the women shouldn't vote. I just fundamentally disagree. I agree with the idea that traditional values of like woman being a home taker, raising children, and men being sort of providers, I agree with that. I don't go as far as sort of the Christian nationalist belief or Andrew's belief, as you've heard from me debating him on this, that the woman is totally subservient to the man at all times. But I just can't go far enough to say that women shouldn't have the right to vote. I just can't. I know this is an argument. I know the counter argument to this argument, right? But I cannot trust giving the government authority to say only people in a special class can vote, because I know that what they'll do is ensure that class is comprised of people that won't have my interest at heart, that won't have the average person interest at heart. In fact, think of some of the metrics you could do. Well, you have to be so intelligent. Perhaps you have to have a degree. Well, who do you think is more likely to have degrees, left-wing voters or right-wing voters? I'm not so sure, but there's a significant chance that there are more left-wing property owners than right-wing property owners. I don't know. It would be interesting, maybe not, because cities, I guess you could say, but we see the direction that's going. We see all the land being brought up by certain people. And it seems like terrible that some guy that's busting his hump, you graduate high school, you're a welder, you get married, you have a kid, you're renting because you're busting your ass to try to eventually buy a home. Sorry, you don't have a say in the direction of the country. No, I wouldn't be for women not voting on a moral framework. Take the practical framework aside, I'm not for that on a moral framework. I do not think that women have something about them that makes them inferior, that they shouldn't have a voice. It's my belief. Now, one thing I did want to push, I think it's funny, because the idea of utilitarianism, and you hear like the Christian nationalists talk about this a lot. The idea behind this is basically saying that you forgo your individual principles for some sort of hypothetical greater good, right? And so as a Christian, you can see why that's a terrible idea, right? You can't violate the word of God because you think that it'll have a practical application. Like sin is sin. Got it, right? But the interesting thing, like the idea of, am I utilitarian because as a populist, I would side with a left-winger if it meant outing corruption. You could say that. But then you get to what Jimbob asked. Would we be advocating for a massive change in the voting system if all of a sudden the voting system started to produce outcomes that we wanted? In other words, if the current voting system led to the exact sort of Christian nationalism that Chad was looking for, would he be against the voting system? Because if he says, well, no, I guess I'd be okay. You know what that makes him? A utilitarian. You see the irony of that? In that position, I'm actually the one that is not a utilitarian, because I'm saying on my beliefs on what voting should be, I hold these beliefs even if those beliefs would lead to a result that I don't like. And that's how I feel. That's why I won't say, well, women shouldn't vote. Oh, look, that ends up helping me politically. No, I don't believe that. Right? So, right. And you could say, no, I probably wouldn't. That's fair. That's an honest answer. But that's a utilitarian outlook. You're saying, well, I'm willing to change what would be my moral principle on who should vote because the outcomes are now preferential to society and to the beliefs that I have. Right? So it's like, it's interesting how you could use that framework of utilitarianism, And I understand, like, just like I don't mind arguing with the ANCAPs and the libertarians about hypothetical utopian visions of what the world should look like. I have no problem. I think there's utility in it. I think it's interesting. It tells you a lot about where people's worldview is. But similarly, it's not going to happen, right? There's not going to be a massive, like, how would you get people to vote to not have a vote? That's basically what it's going to come down to. You'd need people to win elections under the promise of, and by the way, we're going to take away your right to have a voice. Do I have a video on standby of everyone saying it'll stop the spread? Nah, I've seen them on X, but I don't have it on standby right now. Now, unfortunately, I do think I have to get leaving, so I probably won't be able to talk. If you're watching on Twitch and you want to see my interview with Destiny, you can go back to this video on YouTube. It wasn't anything sparks flying or anything. We were just talking about sort of my line of work, dealing with adults with developmental disabilities and how that could impact homelessness. So that was the gist of it. So there wasn't anything super fun in the form of like fighting or anything like that. Oh, wow. Black Elk, I see your message. I'll respond to that later. Now, hopefully, my wife's downstairs with dinner. She's a little perturbed at me because yesterday I was supposed to stream for like 3 hours and it ended up being like closer to 8 hours. So I told her I'd be done by 8:30. So let's not make a liar out of me again because I'll get in trouble. But I do thank you all. I really appreciate it. I will be doing a 24-hour stream this year when we get closer to the election. But I might do a special stream, like a 12-hour stream. I might do something like that as a fundraiser for this computer I'm trying to get. Zen, you don't have to give any more money. You've already given money like 3-4 times for it. So you're exempt. But we might try to line up some interesting guests, maybe a debate panel. Maybe we'll include an episode of The Arena. I'll moderate a debate panel for 2 hours in the middle of that 12-hour live stream. So maybe that's something that we'll be able to do, and it would be something that people would be interested in. I would look for that. I'm pretty busy here with like some family events coming up until outside of April. So we'll be looking at maybe May or early June to try to set something up like that. My computer here is fine, by the way. My technology here I think is fine. I do apologize for the audio issues. It's something I always forget about. So just a little inside baseball, which occurs. I'm very technologically illiterate, so 95% of you are probably like, what an idiot, he's explaining this. But for those that don't know, I use an application called OBS, which allows me to broadcast out. Then within that, I use an application called Restream. So with OBS, you have to put like a special stream key in, and then it streams to that. So it'll be like a YouTube or a Twitch. Restream allows you to put the Restream key in, and then it broadcasts to all of the different keys that I put for YouTube, etc., etc. I usually just stream through OBS. When you do debates, I don't know, there could be bathroom breaks, Nate. When you do debates or interviews or things like that, there are several platforms that you could use. You could use Discord. You could use Zoom, like a Zoom call. One of the ones that people use is StreamYard. Now, I like StreamYard. I think it works quite well. But when you hear me on StreamYard, the audio you're hearing, thank you, Aftershock. Thank you so much for the sub. The audio you're hearing from Jimbob, from Chad, from Hake, that audio is my desktop audio. So it's the exact same audio I'm hearing through my headphones. With the exception of me. I'm not hearing me through my headphones. So you're actually hearing straight through my microphone. So it's not the desktop audio, it's straight through the microphone. StreamYard, for whatever reason, constantly lowers my microphone volume on my computer, not on StreamYard. So Jimbob could hear my volume, and all the other guests could hear my volume. But for you listening, it'll lower my volume to like 40. So you on my channel listening, it'll sound like, why is Rob really quiet? But if you go to Jimbob's channel and listen, it'll sound like I have a normal voice. I have no clue why StreamYard does that. And I always forget about it until I'll read in the chat as I'm streaming. Someone will be like, I could barely hear Rob. I'm like, oh, shit. Yeah, I forget that it does that. I always do. So hopefully that explanation made sense. I'm technologically illiterate, so I don't know if it came across as making sense there, but hopefully people get what I was saying. So anyways, we'll try to find someone real quick here to raid on Twitch. I'm bad. I didn't do it last time. Somehow there's a way to do that in YouTube too. I'm unaware. Let's see. No audio. All right. Oh, let's see. Okay. We got. Here's their options. Lecture Fan, who I like, but I did raid the other day. EOD, who I really like. And Brant for Liberty. Preference? Let's do EOD. I like EOD. Good guy. Oh, hit the wrong button. Yeah, EOD is a great guy. In fact, he has offered to be my debate partner with the Jebtan Connor debate. If that oh, for crying out loud. Hit the wrong button. Which I think EOD would be a fine partner. All right. Enjoy this raid of EOD. Maybe. There we go. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate you all. I'm going to head out. You'll probably see me maybe Sunday night. So thanks so much, everyone. As always, have a good one.